Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name's Councillor Adrian Abbs. I'm currently the chairman of Western Area Planning Committee. It says on my notes here that I'll ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, but I'm not going to do that. So this evening I have with me the Vice Chair, Councillor Clive Hooker, Councillor Caroline Culver, Heather Codling, Patrick Clark, Phil Barnett, Tony Vickers, Howard Wollaston, and that's us all, I'm afraid. So the following officers are in attendance and will be offering advice and support to the meeting. To my right, I have Simon Till, who's the team manager of development and regulation. To my left, Sharon Amar, who's the principal lawyer of planning and governance. Paul Goddard, who is our highways officer, senior highways officer, sorry. Sian Kirby, who is our senior planning officer. No, there, get it right in a second. Sian Kutz, senior planning officer. Emily Ashton Jelly, principal environment delivery officer. Zoom, then coming in remotely. Thank you. Jenny Graham must be coming in remotely as well. Environment. Jess Bayliss, the clerk this evening. Thank you very much. And Paul. And Gordon Oliver, who is our Zoom host, will be looking after us. We do have someone who's watching proceeding this evening, so Dawn Bond. So welcome, and hope you find it interesting. So before we start this evening's meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of other views. Now, I'll add a little note here is that planning is not political anyway, so we really should be, we're just discussing amongst ourselves, and it's just showing respect amongst ourselves. If we do hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, and please follow any instructions given by our officers. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, please do remain seated and wait for officer advice. We will resume the meeting afterwards if appropriate. Do any members have any questions before I proceed? Nope, lovely. Madam Clerk, do we have any apologies this evening?
Yes, Chairman. So I have received apologies from Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
Yeah, thank you very much. He'd sent those to me as well. The next bit of order of business is to invite members to consider the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 20th of September 2023. Does anybody have any feedback for me? Any amendments? Councillor Codling.
I'm going to be very picky here.
Okay.
Page 10, I'm referred in section 13, Councillor Codling, he was not convinced. I'm pretty sure I'm female, was last time I looked. And on page 15, under debate 14, Councillor Codley. It is Codling. I'm just being picky.
That's fair enough. That's an appropriate
Thank you.
amendment, please.
All good.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 15 at the top, it says the ecology report. I think that should say report. And also I've spotted about Councillor Codling as well. Also, 16, it says cesspit, which I think is supposed to be cesspit.
Yeah, no.
So we'll start the meeting on the right tone. But I think it does actually need to be referred to as a septic tank because it's referred to as that previously. And then just a more substantial comment. I think we agreed to have some informatives on the septic tank itself and also on the bridge on the Everington item.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's something that Mr. Till could check back on.
Okay. Given that, I'd like not to sign them this evening. There's too many amendments for me to just sign off, especially as we'll need to now look at the video evidence and make sure that what Councillor Culver has just said is correct.
I don't know if the decision's already been issued, because obviously if it's been issued without it in, it's just a note for the minutes, isn't it? We can't do anything about it if obviously it hasn't been. I don't know if Mr Till can confirm.
Application, is it?
Everington Bungalow.
Sorry, which application?
Everington Bungalow.
Everington Bungalow. Councillors, I believe the decision has been issued on that application.
So, I mean, in that case, if we note it in these minutes, those comments, and then maybe we can check the decision notice and report back to the committee whether the informatives were indeed on there, because it might be, because I know, Mr Till, you quite often do separate notes, don't you? So even though they're not in the minutes, they may well have been in Simon's notes and put on the decision notice, if members are happy with that. Well, not if you're happy with that, if you want to proceed with.
Well, I'd make a note that
minutes, yeah.
I'm not very happy with that, to be honest. That seems quite a substantial error.
Well, we don't know. My point is, we don't know if it's an
Potential
error. If it is an error, there's nothing we can do about it because the decision notice has been issued. If it's not an error, we can report back to committee on that basis.
Okay, I need to take a vote on this, don't I? So all those in favour of the minutes, oh, sorry, Councillor Williston.
Can I raise one thing, Chairman? It's not actually in the minutes. I'm not sure whether I should raise it now or not. But the conditions that we agreed at the last meeting were there'll be a 10-year period for tree planting and screening. And when I saw the proposed consent, it said 5 years. I did query it with the officers at the time. I just want to know that has been changed to 10.
Mr. Till.
Chairman, I don't have that information to hand. I'll need to report that back.
So that's two substantive issues with recollection.
I think I'm more concerned about the condition than the informatives, to be fair. So if members feel they can't sign the
Are
minutes,
you advising me that it's safe to sign these minutes or for us to vote
Well,
on these minutes?
I think there's, if the decision's been issued, there's nothing we're going to be able to do in terms of the minutes. We can't change, then we can just note in the next minutes that members thought it should have been X, Y, and Z. Obviously, outside this committee, if there is a big issue with what's been done, we can look at reasons to, well, if we feel it's appropriate, to see if we can amend the decision through the appropriate mechanisms. But the minutes themselves are the minutes, aren't they? They might be incorrect, and we can note that they're incorrect on the next set of minutes, but they're not in themselves going to change the decision if that decision's been issued.
Okay, then we must ensure that we have it noted in the minutes that there were concerns on the points that have been raised, and that should be reported back to the next meeting. Having taken all that into account, Councillor Vickers.
I'm just going to propose that we allow you to sign the minutes.
Thank you very much. Can I have a second for that? Thank you, Councillor Clark. All those in favour?
Chairman, regarding signing the minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
with the various amendments and notes and so on that we've just mentioned. Any objections? Councillor Williston, was that for or against?
It was 4, wasn't it? Yeah.
And I'm abstaining on the minutes, please. And just for why I'm doing this, just why is it important? Once the minutes are signed off, that is considered the accurate record of what went on.
I think, though, the next minutes will obviously highlight that members disagreed with those aspects of the minutes that you have highlighted. And I think whether Mr Till can check during this meeting or whether it has to be at the next meeting, he can obviously report back to members on what has actually happened on the decision notice itself.
Okay, so we'll now go to the standard order of business, I believe. So I haven't got through the minutes. No, first of all, declarations of interest on tonight's items. Does any member need to declare anything at all? Councillor Vickers.
Just that it's in my ward and I have taken an interest in this and I did call it in, but I will listen to the debate and decide accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williston.
Application number 1 is in my ward.
Okay, Councillor Hooker.
Application number 2 is in my ward. I have been contacted, but it's purely on the process of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. So not lobbying. Okay, so we would now normally go on to the substantive issues. I have been made aware by the various gurglings. That we have a young child with us this evening, and I believe that application is slated to be last this evening. I would like the members to agree to move that to the forward of the meeting, as much as it's lovely and peaceful at the moment. There's who knows. So members, can I have a
Proposal, Chairman, I'm very happy to second that.
thank you? Anybody second it? Okay, Councillor Hooker. You're seconding it. So you're proposing it, Councillor Vickers.
Yep.
Okay, all those in favour? Okay, so we are going to switch the order around. That means I believe
Chairman?
yes, sorry.
May I ask
Councillor
if you're changing the order? The residents of my ward in numbers have turned up this evening and wonder if we could put that in second. I think there's more attending than the application that was going to go first.
I'm happy to second that too, actually, because that in the past has been one of the criteria in fact, going back to when we were last in control. I think,
Yes,
in fact,
just
for a
bear me
while
with,
since.
before we make another change, just bear with me for 1 second. Mr. Till, do you think by making this change, we will affect, or do you believe we'll get through all 3 applications this evening?
Chairman, it's my view that we will be able to cover all of the business on the agenda this evening.
Okay, then I'm also happy to take that. Did we all vote on it? Sorry, who proposed it? Councillor Hooker, who seconded it? Councillor Vickers, all those in favour? So we're doing it completely back to front. So, great. So first up, we have Kate's Cottage. Is that right? No, that's item. Why have I got 4 items? Yes. No, is it? Look, why is it item 4? Right. Yeah, so we're going to go with Kate's Cottage first. I'm going to start by inviting Ms. Kirby to do yes. I thought you were to do a presentation for us on this application. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for Kate's Cottage, Craven Road, Inkpen, Hungerford. This application seeks planning permission for an additional vehicle access and new workshop building. This was brought to committee as a call-in by ward member where application was recommended for refusal. However, over 10 letters of objection were also received. The application site lies outside the defined settlement boundary in the open countryside and policy terms. It also lies within the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. A public right-of-way runs past the application site to the north, and there is an existing vehicle access to the site from the public highway to the west. The cottage sits towards the centre of a long, narrow site. There is a change in levels at the site which increases in height from north to south. The proposed additional vehicle access is from the public right-of-way to the north, and that currently provides access to Hunter's Way and Crow's Nest. The proposed workshop building is set to the south of the site and would replace 2 smaller buildings, which is a garage and a cabin. The use of the building was confirmed as a workshop for private cars kept as a hobby. The existing access is to be retained. It would also be relayed with permeable gravel. New gates are also proposed at a height less than 1 metre, which would not require planning permission. The plans state that the existing access would only be used occasionally. The amended plans show the proposed workshop building to be reduced in scale to single-storey building measuring 7.35 metres in width by 6.45 metres in depth and 4.2 metres in height. It would sit on the higher ground to the south of the site, where it replaced 2 existing smaller outbuildings and be partly screened by the vegetation on the south and eastern boundaries. The scale of the building is now considered appropriate given the topography of the site. The site, whilst long and narrow, and the proposed building sits comfortably at the southern end in an area that is currently already occupied by buildings and parked vehicles. The proposal would result in a more cohesive, less cluttered appearance than the existing arrangement. The materials have been amended to timber boarding and tile to match the existing house, which is appropriate in the AONB countryside. The proposed new access appears to be in use informally. The proposed laying of permeable gravel would have little effect on the character of the area. Whilst there will be a loss of relatively small area of vegetation on the boundary, which is regrettable, it is necessary to facilitate suitable visibility displays, and the site is otherwise well screened from the highway view. However, the application has been recommended refusal due to an objection from the council's land drainage engineer due to lack of evidence supporting the proposed surface water drainage. In this instance, the proposal is to use infiltration devices such as permeable paving and soakaways. This might not be acceptable due to the underlying geology of the site. In addition, it is highly likely any exceedance from the failed private drainage would find its way into the highway's drainage system due to the steepness location of the access to the property from Craven Road. The highway drainage system is located along Craven Road, which is on a hill, and it drains to a watercourse approximately 70 metres to the north of the site. The watercourse is highlighted as being at risk of surface water flooding. Therefore, the council must ensure that only the road is drained by this system and that we do not increase flood risk. Private connections or exceedance from private systems cannot be permitted to enter the highway drainage system. Existing surface water drainage provision within the site extent should also be determined, and if there is any risk of or conflicts, this needs to be addressed as part of the application. Given that there are no public sewers identified in this location and that only drainage connected to the watercourse is the highway drainage, the applicant may not be able to implement adequate surface water drainage should the ground investigations rule out infiltration as a viable means to drain the site. Overall, the amended design of the proposed outbuilding has been assessed to ensure that the replacement building is appropriate in scale, design and materials, taking into consideration the impact on the character and appearance of the area, that of the wider AONB, and the impact and amenity of neighbours. The impact of the building is considered acceptable for the reasons outlined above, and the proposed access has been considered by the Highways Authority and found to be acceptable. However, the application fails to provide sufficient information with regards to potential impact on increased flood risk to the highway drainage and consequently the watercourse 70 metres to the north of the property. Therefore, it has been recommended refusal on these drainage grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I see we have Mr. Goddard with us this evening. So could I ask you to make any comments you wish to make, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe Cheyenne Kirby has covered the flooding and the drainage issues. Colleagues in Sustainable Urban Drainage are concerned about this matter, hence the recommendation for refusal before you. Cheyenne Kirby has also mentioned the provision of access to the development. There is an existing access to the south that will be improved, and proposal before you is to provide an additional access onto the public right-of-way just to the north. The access to the vehicular public highway itself is unchanged. The access is purely onto the public right-of-way. Public right-of-way colleagues have been consulted and they have not raised any objection, but obviously the applicant will need permission from public rights-of-way to open up an access onto it. We've looked at the issue carefully, and the local highway authority with regards to vehicular access and public rights-of-way access has no objection to the proposal. The access is likely to generate a small number of vehicle movements per day. At most, we would say about 3 in, 3 out, which in our view is not sufficient to warrant refusal on traffic grounds or access grounds. But obviously the reason for refusal on the highway drainage issue still stands. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the speakers on this application. Just before we begin, whatever slot you have or whoever wants to speak, and you only get 5 minutes. So if there were 10 objectors, it would be 10 objectors divided by, or the 5 minutes divided by the 10 objectors. Same with supporters, agents, anybody. So please keep that in mind before you come to the lectern, and that there is a stopwatch. The officer will be keen on the stopwatch, and we will try and give you a warning, obviously a minute before, but essentially it's 5 minutes. So In order of speakers, and the first one I have on my list is Dr. David Thomas and Darren Durham from Inkpen Parish Council, which I've asked. There you are. Was my instruction clear about the 5 minutes? As there are two. Thank you very much. There's a little person button. If you press that, the red light will come on and you should be away. No, new battery then. Hang on a moment.
Would you be kind enough to give us a heads up before we get to heart?
We'll give you a 1 minute warning and then a 10-second warning. The speaker doesn't seem to be on at the moment. Right. It follows the age-old rule of switch it off and on again then. So. There you go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on a second. Hang on a sec. Hang on. One moment. It's flashing. I don't know what flashing means.
Is that working now? Okay. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. So having heard all of the issues around the additional driveway, I would just like to add that this additional access is on a notoriously black spot in Craven Road. And, you know, we feel at this stage it's unnecessary and would be adding additional risk to an already not very pleasant part of the road. As many of you may be aware, this is the main road in between Inkpen and Hungerford. And that area is well known by the residents, but not so well known by visitors. So there's quite often altercations on that part of the road. We believe the limited space for the access will mean that anyone using that access will have to reverse essentially into a blind spot. And also without the ability to turn around, it will also force all of those vehicles into Inkpen and then find a suitable place to turn around. And as already pointed out, this part of the road does not allow vehicles to pass normally. So this has historically been used as a pull-in. Furthermore, I think the plans, the site plans, the Google Maps and the site view do not really easily display the dangerous nature of this part of the road. So for that reason, we feel that this part should be rejected.
Good evening, councillors. Highway seem to have ignored a report by West Berkshire Council's Public Rights of Way officer that the northern frontage of Kate's Cottage does in fact form part of the highway. This affects the conditions that apply here, including turning circles. The prior map, Public Rights of Way map, is on the West Berkshire website and clearly shows the effect on the northern edge of this application. Both the current and previous heads of planning know well CS16 of the West Berkshire Core Strategy Development Plan. It applies to this application. SUDS and the WBC drainage engineer have raised objection to this application. Further, the plan soakaway contravenes the mandatory building regulation H2 drainage fields and mounds para 1, subpara 27 to subpara 30. Thirdly, the development plan accompanying this application is misleading as it doesn't show the extent of hedging and landscaping or the topography. This application would cause a dramatic reduction in amenity for this dwelling. Kate's Cottage has a single-storey development and driveway to the south with a limited amenity area. A driveway to the north would obliterate any amenity land to the northern side of this plot, causing severe overdevelopment and retaining only about a quarter of the plot for amenity use. For a young family, this loss of amenity would seem to be rather detrimental. Inkpen is considered a conservation area. Developments of this sort are clearly unsympathetic and climate unfriendly. What is the point of the parish council trying to rewild when developments in Inkpen approved by West Berkshire Council so often seem to do the opposite?
1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm done.
Okay, we didn't need 1 minute. Just for the record, could you please state who's who?
Could I, what, sorry?
Which one of you is
Yeah,
who?
Darren Durham.
And I'm David Thomas.
Thank you very much. Okay. Right, so we're going to please stay at the lectern. The next part is that, given what you've said, members will now potentially ask you questions on what you said. So, Mr. Councillor Barnett.
Through you, Chairman, to you, Darren. In the introduction, you were mentioning about accident black spot. Are you talking about the whole of that area, or the north side, or the south
So
side?
it's the north side, well, it's actually as you come out of that junction, so it's to the north of the property. There's a kink in the road, essentially, which means vehicles travelling towards Hungerford have to pull in to the left-hand side, and then traffic coming into Inkpen have to pull into the area in front of Kate's Cottage. Typically, people speed up through there if they don't see a car coming in either direction, and quite often, not always serious, but there's quite often altercations at that junction where people are just getting frustrated by the layout of the road. And quite often, if the refuse lorry or the bus is coming through, it completely causes chaos there. So.
Any other member? Councillor Hooker?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just one question. You're obviously concerned about the additional use of the road and obviously the additional risk. What is your perception of the additional use of that driveway, and what times do you think it's going to happen? And is that a time that you think it's going to be more hazardous?
So I don't think it's necessarily the increased use. I think it was pointed out that maybe that drive would be used instead of the one to the south or vice versa. I think the fact is that if there's a workshop with vehicles being worked on, then maybe that access to the north would be used more. And I think the main point there is you cannot turn round. So any vehicle that goes onto that driveway is going to have to reverse into a blind bend, essentially. So it's really, to my mind, it's sort of prevention rather than cure in this instance. It's yeah, that's how I see it.
Thank you.
Any more for any more? No, thank you very much indeed. Next, we have up the applicant agent and Brownie Malden, applicant and Duncan Woolwich, who's the agent. I believe you're both here. And if I got your names pronounced incorrectly, I do apologise. Right. So let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, ready.
And you know about the 5 minutes. Yeah. We'll give you a 1 minute warning and then 10 seconds. Ready, steady, go.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for obviously moving around the agenda this evening. It's greatly appreciated. So as can be seen, we've been undertaking sympathetic renovations to the property over the past couple of years to try and ensure the continued presence of this period property on the road, as well as bringing it up to modern standards in terms of heat retention and energy supply, which you can see we've installed an air source heat pump. The last stage of the renovations include applying to open up the existing access for vehicular use, as well as a garage and workshop for personal use. This is both for our personal use, but also intended to improve the site for future residents. The reason for moving the driveway is to make access to the house much easier and on the same level, rather than having to walk from one end of the plot down to the other and down the stairs. This has been particularly evident, the difficulties for this, as we have elderly relatives with mobility issues who have found it difficult to visit us currently. Additionally, as you can see, we have them this evening, we have a small child, and manoeuvring prams and car seats is particularly precarious on the site. Moving the driveway would provide a much more immediate access route to the property without a requirement to navigate the stairs. There have obviously been no objections for the relevant consultees with regards to this new access. The other point that we'd like to make on that is that the accidents that have been mentioned by the objectors have all been in relation to speed on the road. So that is already current access for 2 properties onto the site, and none of the accidents are as a result of those residents coming or going from that entrance. If the speed limit was obeyed, there wouldn't be any accidents. Obviously, we don't have control of cars obeying the speed limit. The initial plans for the workshop included an office above. However, there were concerns about the height of the structure, as mentioned in the report, and the impact that this might have on the area. As such, we have listened to this and understood the concerns and have amended the plan to remove this second storey. Again, there have been no objections from relevant consultees with regards to these amended plans. The only reason for refusal of this application is the drainage and potential risk of flooding. Whilst we would argue that the proposal is not going to have any harmful effect on flood risk, given the permeability of the site remaining unchanged and the lack of flooding currently, we are happy to provide this information as a condition of approval. We did have a percolation test carried out on the land to the north side of the property in order to put the sewage treatment plant in, and it was found to be suitable for this purpose. I hope you understand the reason that we didn't do this is we want to carry out such work with a condition of approval, given that we were advised by engineers that surveys can get quite expensive. In these current financial times, we deemed it reckless to conduct these tests without it being a condition for approval.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the planning officer for the presentation. As been mentioned, all the matters concerning the design of the workshop, the changes to the existing access and the proposed safe and new access have now all been deemed acceptable by the officer and the relevant consultees. The only reason given for refusal is that of insufficient information pertaining to the drainage. This has been recommended by Mr Paul Backus, the Council's Principal Drainage Engineer and Flood Risk Engineer, who has insisted that the required drainage information provided pre-determination and not as a condition of an approval, which would be normal, in my experience. Mr Backus has been very helpful in identifying the methodology of the required report and has stated in his own words that we only take an interest in minor applications where they may have a serious impact on and significant flood risk issues, or if the proposal is unlikely to work. We would argue that the proposal is not going to have any harmful effect on flood risk and that the applicants are happy to provide this information at a later date to prove it does work. But as I'm sure you'll understand, they do not want to spend additional money at this point without the certainty of an approval in the back pocket.
1 minute.
I can only ask the committee to give this matter the most careful consideration and hopefully agree that an approval can be granted with the drainage condition attached. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Members, Councillor Vickers, off you go.
Thank you very much. Bryony, you referred to the existing northern access, which of course isn't formally an access at all, but it was created, as I understand it, for the cesspit that you referred to, and that hence the gap in the hedge. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about the issue that the parish council raised when you actually formalise that access about getting in and out, with the room to turn and the problem about reversing back into the road?
Yes, of course. So as you mentioned, Councillor Vickers, the entrance, it was initially a pedestrian access. The reason it's been opened up and the hedges have been taken out is because we had the gas tank, the oil tank removed from the garden, and the old septic tank, which was not up to standards and regulations, replaced with a sewage treatment plant, which is why the site looks as though it does and why all the hedges have been removed. We do believe there is enough room to enter and come and go in a forward gear. There would be no intention of reversing onto the private, onto the PROW.
Thank you. I'll probably ask the same question of the highways officer later. Cheers.
Any other members? Councillor Liston.
Sorry, Chair, I'm confused here. I'm sorry. Where was the original access and entrance to your property? Was it the south end or the north?
The south end. So there are both accesses original. One, the north side was pedestrian and the south side was driveway, but both existed from the beginning.
And the septic tank, whatever it is at the south end, is it?
Is it the north?
North end.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you for your presentation. A bit of help, please. when one puts in a plan and applications, there's a process to go to, and you obviously got an agent there that's advising you. And it's normally the council set the conditions as to what you need to submit. It's like you're saying, well, I want to put a garage up, but I'm not going to put the plans in until you actually pass them. Here we are. I'm not going to put the suds in until you pass it. I mean, what was the thought process here of where you thought you might go with this? I mean, did you honestly think that it'll go through and then we'll tag along afterwards and commit the money?
Well, obviously, when you make an application such as this, a drainage information is not a requirement, a mandatory requirement. So this is pretty much always a condition of an approval, that these conditions must be approved, drainage information to be provided and approved prior to commencement, which is normal. So it seems just iniquitous to us to say that you have to provide this, you have to go to the nth degree of maybe spending £1,000 to £2,000 more on reports that might ultimately prove that the drainage works, but the remainder of the application was potentially not approvable. So this is kind of when the case officer came back to us and said, look, this is the decision, we have to make a recommendation for refusal because of the lack of information. We had to draw a line somewhere and spending additional money, or my clients did, and say, well, we have to take this to committee to get this heard, to potentially get an approval with a condition, which obviously if the condition can't be met, it can't be done.
I also
So
want
as a follow-up, if I may, then you brought this to committee to test really the officer's decision.
We brought it to committee because we didn't want to commit to the additional money at this point.
We did actually look at applications on the rest of the road as well, and there were other applications where SUDS hadn't responded in the initial thing, but it had been a condition of condition attached to the others. So we felt that we didn't really understand why it was a precondition for us, but a condition attached to other applications on the road this year. It seemed that it was outside of the norm for other applications.
Okay. I have a less, Councillor Codding. I know, right. I've just obviously it became clear that before we had this meeting this evening that they were asking you to provide the information. How many weeks before this meeting were you aware that actually this evening this is the main reason for, in fact, the only reason for refusal at the moment?
A week. The report was done 5 days ago, so obviously we wouldn't have had an opportunity to
No,
do
indeed,
anything
that's
about
what I was
it
trying to
that time.
establish, whether the opportunity had been there. Thank you very much. Any other members? No. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So next up is Councillor Tony Vickers, who's the ward member, sorry, to be clear.
Yes, indeed, Chairman, that's why I'm here. Councillor Gaines, I excused her. She didn't know the site, she hadn't been to the site visit. So, yeah, I'm really pleased that all of those members present did attend the site visit. So you've seen all the matters that have been referred to under in the report and mentioned by the Parish Council. We've heard that the opening at the bottom of the site, i.e. the north end, was already in existence informally for pedestrian access. And in fact, it looks as though some vehicles at some stage have been up and down there and there's sort of hardcore surface. So we've already got an issue with, I would have thought, the, what's the technical word, the permeability of that surface, which of course I suppose could be partly corrected if necessary. I just want to go back to the highways issues, which I thought we'd addressed satisfactorily, according to the report. But I just make the point that the accidents that count in terms of, you know, the way we look at these things are injury accidents, and I'm not aware that there were any injury accidents. People may crash on a blind bend like that, but as the applicant themselves have said, I don't believe there have been any injury accidents or indeed any accidents of any sort caused by people entering or leaving that piece of land, which is the pull-in, and incidentally isn't highway land, as I understand. I asked that question on the site visit and was told that told where the boundaries of the individual properties were. Like lots of bits of land, maybe nobody owns it, but it's not a planning matter. as to what we do with that piece of land or the access onto it. And in effect, you've really only got one access to the highway from 3 properties that share one entrance, is the way I look at it. So hopefully the officer can answer questions we'll put later perhaps about the reversing out of that driveway, and we can put that issue to bed. But I think it leads on to what I think is reasonable on behalf of the applicants not to have at this stage put in all the planning information, because until they were satisfied that all these other matters were dealt with, and they weren't until the report came out saying that that was the only matter, I think if I was them, I'd want to know that all the other issues were covered before I went to the expense of commissioning an expensive detailed report on the drainage. Because if we'd refused it for other reasons, well, they'd have been wasting their money on that expensive report. And I also like to point out, and I did on the site visit, you remember, the steps that are leading down from the top of the site, the southern access, which are very difficult for a family with a young child. And it's been referred to that the site, perhaps because of its lack of a private amenity space, is not appropriate for a young family. But really, you need to get in and out of your house from a safe place off the highway, which is what they're trying to do with that lower access. So I think they are doing the area a favour by restoring and bringing back into use a house that has certain merit and probably producing the carbon footprint at the same time. So that's all I would like to say as the ward member. I've taken an interest in this because I could see there were a number of reasons to object to it at the start. And I'm pleased that most of them have been dealt with. In fact, all of the ones that I was aware of until the report came out and we saw there was this new problem with the drainage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. If you'd like to remain there just for a moment. Members, any questions of Councillor Vickers? No, I do have one myself, because you mentioned the inappropriateness of the access from the current entrance down to the house. But when whoever would purchasing that property would be aware of that. And I don't think that's actually a planning consideration that I'm aware of. Would you not agree that, in fact, you buy the house not on the assumption you can change it, you buy the house as it is, and with the situation that you see in front of you?
Caveat emptor, I think it is, buyer beware.
Indeed.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But I think people are also entitled, Chairman, to try and make the changes that suit them personally in their circumstances. And it didn't look as though maybe there are other ways of getting over that problem. I agree with you, but this is the way they propose, and that's what's in front of us, and that's all we can consider.
Okay. Any other members? Any questions? No. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. Okay, so we're now going to move to the members being able to seek clarification of information presented so far and what the officers presented themselves. I've got a note here, but that's a question I was going to ask you, so I'll come to that in a second. So, members, who would like to start off? Councillor Codling.
Can I just confirm with officers that this application would be approved apart from the drainage report? Everything else they're happy with?
Thank you, councillor. Yes, I can confirm that everything else has been deemed satisfactory. It's just down to the drainage.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Councillor Luston.
Thank you, Chairman. The objectors pointed out or made a claim that it's impossible, you need to reverse out onto the road. Can I just check with highways that is in fact correct or incorrect?
Chairman, I prefer people not to reverse out onto the road. As the applicants mentioned, they reverse onto the public right of way, not onto the vehicle road. And I am confident that they would be able to reverse onto the public right of way and then drive onto the Craven Road itself in forward gear.
Any other members? Councillor Williston, yeah.
There was also mention of a lack of amenity land for young children. From what I can see on the plan, that's not the case. So I just wonder whether anybody has a view on that, the officer side.
Thank you, councillor. In terms of, we don't have any policies in terms of if there's house extensions in terms of amenity space, but for new dwellings, the minimum amenity space for this size dwelling would be a minimum of 75 square meters, and there would be at least 200 square meters of a usable amenity space remaining to the south of the property if this development went ahead.
So to be clear, if this was a new build, it will be acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I think I'm right in saying that Mr. Paul Backus arrived late after you introduced the officers. So I'm wondering if officers would assist us by allowing Mr. Backus to explain in his words as the expert why he believes that as was described, the normal conditional approval subject to SUDs wasn't appropriate here. Is that possible, Chairman?
Well, if the relevant officers here, you can ask for clarification from the officers, so no problem at all. So away you go.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks, Tony. The reason for requiring data up front is because I need to be able to assess whether that site is going to cause any risk of flooding whatsoever. The only information that I have to go on with this application was through my own research, which showed that the site might be underlain by clay. Clay typically precludes the use of infiltration devices, which were being suggested on this site. Now, if I was comfortable that there was another option for which to try and discharge the runoff from the site, if there was a watercourse nearby or a public sewer, I wouldn't be too concerned. But the reality was there was no other option, as I mentioned in my initial comments. So the only way to get rid of the water on this site is through infiltration. The only evidence I have at that time is that the site might be underlain by clay, which might not allow for infiltration. Therefore, there might not be a suitable way to get rid of the surface water from this site, which therefore will increase flood risk and notably increase flood risk to the highways. That would contravene, policy CS16. It would also mean that we would have to look at the National Planning Policy Framework and figure out which clauses are breached there. And we talk about waste of money as well. Is it not more wasteful to allow the applicant to believe that they've got, an approved application with a few conditions?
We don't need debate from.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to phrase it like that. It was a bit of a rhetorical one. But yes, it's to help the applicants as well. I'm not doing it to try and be cruel. I want them to be able to realise that they should be carrying out these investigations up front and early on before they waste money further down the line. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor, did I see you raise your hand? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. A question to the officer. Can you give me some indication on applications like this? Is it the council's policy that we pass applications with the agreement that you can come along later with a SUDS document? How often does this happen, please?
Thank you, councillor. It does depend. So in this case, obviously, like our drainage engineer has said, if we think it's possible, we will try and go with conditions. In this case, the drainage engineer has deemed it's not possible, so we can't. So it wouldn't be wise to allow conditions. And we've also had concerns in the past where we've had applications that have been determined with a condition on, for example, drainage, and then they've realised at a later date that this is not achievable at all, and it's not the correct way in which planning should work in terms of government legislation. Is we should try and get all the information up first, because it's not considered acceptable to have a permission that can't be carried out if we don't know.
It looks like Mr. Till wants to come in.
Thank you. I don't disagree with anything that the case officer has just said. You'll be glad to hear, but I would like to just add a little seasoning on top of it, as it were. A condition has to be reasonable in order to be applied. That is a test of the MPPF. And in the event that we apply a condition that the applicant cannot comply with, that condition would be manifestly unreasonable. We shouldn't have applied it, and we would have no grounds of appeal in terms of defending it were it to be appealed. So once the applicant had discovered that they couldn't comply with it. In respect to the condition that we've recommended in this particular case, members, I would ask you to note that, as per always with planning, it's each site on its individual merits. And in this particular case, there are certain, as the drainage officers explained, site-specific constraints which raise concerns in terms of potential impacts on drainage, which we just don't know about because we haven't been given sufficient information to determine those impacts. So the upshot of this is, in the drainage officer's, drainage engineer's opinion, and in my opinion, we don't have enough information to be satisfied that if we were to recommend a condition requiring the provision of further information at this stage, the overall SUD scheme would be workable, that we would be able to arrive at the outcome that that SUD scheme could be used for this site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Liston.
I'm slightly confused because if you look at the existing buildings on the site, and you look at the existing area and the access to it, which I think from memory from the site visit was sort of a gravel type anyway, what's the actual difference? What's causing this problem?
Thank you, Councillor. The existing on-site used to be, from aerial view, used to be grass. It's been changed, I believe, more recently, as stated by the applicant, because they've had building works carried out, such as the oil tank, I believe, was removed, what the applicant said, and now this has been replaced with another septic tank or treatment works, etc. So when we went out on site, some of that might be from the recent building works and so it has changed already.
I suppose my point is we've had some of the heaviest rainfall we have seen for years and years and years, and it doesn't seem to have caused a problem.
Yeah, sorry, just to weigh in on that. I didn't get any of that evidence. This is what I'm asking for. I need to base my decisions on evidence. If the applicant refuses to submit appropriate evidence, I can't make a decision. Therefore, we get into this situation where I say, please, can you submit the appropriate data, appropriate tests? They say, no, not you have to condition that.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one question of you, Mr. Till. When did we let the applicant know about this?
Thank you, Chairman. And without wishing to get into any tit for tat, but I have reviewed the file while the applicant and ward member were making their presentations after the statement regarding that matter was made. I can confirm that the case officer wrote to the applicant on the 13th of October to request for them to confirm whether they would submit additional information pursuant to addressing drainage and provision of SUDs. The case officer made it clear within that email that if further information wasn't submitted, then the officer's recommendation would be unfavourable, and we would put the application in front of the next available planning committee. The applicant acknowledged that correspondence on the same day, on the 13th of October.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Well, bear with me, members, just a couple of things for highways. We've heard about this being an accident black spot. What's actually, and that I think somebody said that two cars couldn't pass. What is the width of the road at that point, please?
point of information, Chairman, I happened to be there the day before yesterday when a cattle truck moved past and it almost took up the entire road, if that gives you some indication of the width of the road.
Thank you very much, councillor.
I'm just taking some measurements.
Oh, you're measuring it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and the second question while you're thinking then or measuring, it's been said that vehicles can't turn around. What is the width of the internal plot? Admittedly, you might not be able to turn around in one go, but surely you can do a 3 or 4 point turn.
Yes, it's not the width of the plot, it's the amount of room that there is in the public right of way that would enable the vehicle to reverse out.
Did I mishear then? Because I thought one of the arguments it would have to reverse out onto the public highway. Well, we know it's not the public highway. So what is the actual? Is it impossible to turn around then?
No.
Right.
The vehicle reverses from the site onto the public right of way. The public right of way.
It might reverse, or it will, or have to reverse.
Or reverse in, or reverse out from the site onto the public right of way, and it would then drive in forward gear onto Craven Road itself.
Okay, I'm not quite getting my point across, my question across really. I mean, I've got a car and it's a fairly large car, and I've been on site, and the width of the plot is certainly longer than my car. So why can't I simply do a 3 or 4 point turn on site and always come out facing forward? So in other words, is the argument about safety here one of choice? I choose to reverse out, or is it actually that it's so narrow that it's impossible to do any kind of turn, and therefore I must come out in reverse?
The width of the site is about 9 meters. Yeah, they if they wanted to, could provide perhaps a turning facility within the site so that they didn't have to reverse into the public right of way. The difficulty is that we in highways can't insist that they do that. We can only insist that people drive onto a road in forward gear if the road is classified, the A4, the B4000, or a C classified road. So yeah, having on-site turning that they then didn't have to reverse on the public right of way would be an advantage to the proposal. But because the public right of way as a highway is still a highway, isn't a classified road, we can't insist on having on-site turning.
So from a legal perspective, highways perspective, that's why there's no objection from yourself.
That is correct, Chairman.
It's all okay, fine.
Only from my point of view.
Indeed, thanks. Anybody else? So we're going to move into debate otherwise. Councillor Culver.
Just a quick question. The document that Mr. Till quoted, is that available on the website? Because I'm looking, the only SUDS document I can see on that file is from the 16th of August.
Sorry, SUDS document. I'm talking about correspondence between the case officer and the planning agent and applicants. It may not be recorded publicly, but should members wish for a copy of it outside of this meeting, I can point them in that direction.
Okay. Would we usually expect to have that on the file, or would that sort of detail just be kept on private emails, just for my clarification?
Just 1 second, please, Councillor Culver. What's the legal situation? Should it all be on the website or not?
I would have thought that that document should have been made publicly available.
Okay.
I haven't obviously seen the full contents of it myself, but you would normally expect correspondence with agents to be public. It's certainly something I think that should be available on the sort of planning register.
So can the minutes reflect that a request was made that the evidence is actually provided both on the portal is updated and a confirmation is then brought forward? I've no doubt what Mr. Tilley's saying is correct, but just for completeness, let's.
Would it assist if you lean across? Would it assist if you lean across and just have a look at Mr. Till's, and then you can confirm to the other members if there is concern about it?
I don't want to cast aspersions that I don't believe it exists. It's just, you know, is it standard practice that this should be available?
Chairman, I thought I'd seen that correspondence and that there was a request at about that time, but I haven't got my device with me to check.
This is, yeah.
As I thought, Councillor promoted you again. Mr. Till is absolutely correct in what he said, and I've just read that myself, so I'm really quite happy to support that if necessary, Councillor Corver. So, any final, yes, Councillor Clark.
Just one question for Mr. Till, or Councillor Till. I'm sorry for going over this again, but I think you said earlier on that the point of applying a condition in this case is that it's got to be reasonable. It's got to be something that can be done. So are you saying that we cannot apply a condition about drainage on this?
Members, I'm not saying that you cannot apply a condition because ultimately this is your decision and your officers can only advise and recommend. My advice to you is that the information we've been provided with is insufficient to confirm that the drainage strategy proposed would be workable, and therefore it may not be possible to comply with a condition that required further information to be provided or compliance with that drainage strategy.
Yes, by all means.
I mean, I think what Mr. Till is sort of saying is, in his professional opinion, it doesn't meet the tests in the MPPF for a condition. So just have to bear that in mind.
Okay, I think we've had a fairly good session with asking the officers for clarifications. So we're going to go into the final bit, debate. Who would like to kick us off, please? Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, yes, I think we benefited greatly from the officers' comments. A number of officers have shed light on this drainage issue. And I must admit, I came to the meeting thinking, actually, that's the best way to do it. Just say, approve this or give consent subject to a drainage condition. I'm now not so sure about it, actually. I can see the argument that actually the applicant could be misled in a way by our professional officers, or by us rather, overturning the professional officer's opinion that in their judgment such a condition might, for lack of the evidence in front of them and us now, be considered unreasonable. I'm just going to leave it at that and leave others to perhaps propose it. I think there are two alternatives in front of us. We go with what I came into the room thinking, because Mr. Till has just said we are free to impose a condition and give it consent, in which case we've got to start looking at the other conditions we might want to apply. And I did come in with a list because I was thinking about this earlier today. What would be the conditions, other conditions that we might want? Obviously with officers' consent and agreement. But we either do that or we go with the recommendation in front of us in the report, which means that the onus is now back on the applicant and their agent to commission the necessary report if they want to get approval. But I think we also need to reassure them that on every other count, we agree with the officers and that is the only reason for discharge, because we have heard from the parish council that there are other concerns by others still besides the drainage. I'm happy myself about the others. I would remark that, perhaps we could wish in hindsight that there had been a real downpour rather than a slight drizzle, a slight visit, because I did look, there was no water coming out of the site, from the site onto the highway, and indeed the gully in the highway at that point wasn't taking what little water that was coming down the road because it wasn't actually terribly well positioned. So the water was bypassing the gully, and probably any water from the site would also bypass the gully. But that's a bit of detail. So I'll leave you at that.
Thank you. I think I had Councillor Clark, then Councillor Codling, then Councillor Barnett.
Thank you. I wonder, is there, rather than the two alternatives that Tony suggests, a third alternative as well, which is deferring until the relevant information is available?
You could suggest it, I believe.
I don't see too many raised eyebrows.
I can't say I'm inclined to go with the third option, but it wouldn't be my decision; it'd be members' decision. But you could propose that if you wish. So, okay, you're pondering that. I take it, Councillor Clark, Councillor Codling.
I think it's a little disappointing that we have professional officers and when an applicant comes forward, they don't take their advice. I know they have an agent who has, offered other advice, but it's easy enough to pick up the phone and discuss it with an officer and say, look, why are you doing this to me? So I'm sort of reluctant to do anything other than recommend refusal.
Okay, councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members.
Sorry, just before, is that a proposal?
That's a proposal.
Okay. So before we go on, is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Hooker, thank you very much. We'll just let Councillor Barnett say his piece before.
Well, yeah, thanks, Chairman, members. I'm again similar to some of the other members in some difficulty trying to ascertain the exact position and where we are likely to go if we are obviously following officer's recommendation here, because it looks to me as if the applicant will have to, if it is the case that it's officer's recommendation, resubmit a new application. And perhaps I could ask that question, and probably I should have asked it before. Is it a case that the case is closed and a new application will have to be resubmitted?
Well, we are not seeking clarification of the officers at this point, Councillor Barnett. So I'm afraid we're going to move on. And Councillor Culber.
Thank you, Chairman. Just slightly concerned, we did have an application a few weeks ago that we approved, and we had a condition about drainage, even though the drainage officer had 3 times asked for a proper flood risk assessment and it hadn't been forthcoming. So I'm slightly concerned that there's a bit of an inconsistency there. However, for that reason, I voted against that one because I was satisfied that the drainage officer's concerns were valid. So I'm inclined to do the same this evening, to agree with the officers and say that this should be refused because that information is not available.
Okay, so I think if you don't mind, because we've had a proposer and a seconder, I think, and a little bit of extra debate afterwards, I think I'm going to take a vote on that one. So all those in favour of accepting officer's recommendation and refusing this application, please raise your hands. All those against? Anybody abstain? Are you against or yeah? Yeah, and of those abstaining? You got that? No, I believe that passes. So unfortunately, but at least you know exactly what you need to do to get through to the next stage. So sorry about that. Understood. Thank you very much, though, for coming along. All right, take care. So, all right. Reverse order. Right. So. We are now going to 2202-870 Green Gates, Front Street, East Garston. Are we all ready? Yes, I'm going to take that as yes because nobody said no. So, Miss Kirby, over to you again.
Wait.
No, they've gone. Sorry. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for the demolition of an existing 3-bedroom structurally compromised cottage and provision of a replacement 4-bedroom cottage with provision for access and related landscaping. This was brought to committee as we received over 10 letters of objection and the recommendation is for approval. The application site is a dwelling located within the settlement boundary of East Garston, within the North Wessex Downs AONB, within the conservation area and the River Lambourne Special Area of Conservation Nutrient Neutrality Zone. The application is also located adjacent to the River Lambourne, which is a SSSI, and the Lambourne Valley Biodiversity Opportunity Area, as well as adjacent to flood zones 2 and 3. Amended plans were received on the 8th of June to overcome concerns raised by the highways officer in regards to highway safety. This proposed to move the position of the proposed replacement dwelling around 2.45 metres back from the road and 0.5 metres to the southeast compared to the existing on-site dwelling. The access will run to the northwest with off-road parking for 3 vehicles and a turning area created to the northeast to allow for parking and safe turning on site. The main entrance will remain to the southeast elevation like the existing dwelling. The existing dwelling is an attractive historic cottage displaying traditional character reflective of the rural area. It is a modest structure of 1.5 stories constructed of red brick with a roof of half-hip construction with traditional clay tiles. It's prominently located in one of the main thoroughfares that run through the conservation area. The existing dwelling is of local historic and architectural interest. Its interest or significance lies in the combination of the building's age, modest appearance, use of traditional materials and techniques. Its communal and social value as the former post office and the positive contribution it makes to the historical and architectural unity of the East Garston conservation area. Therefore, whilst not currently included in the West Berks local list of heritage assets, the building is a non-designated heritage asset within the meaning and definition contained within the NPPF. A structural report was submitted with the application, which concluded that the building is beyond reasonable or practical repair due to excessive lean and instability in the walls and roof, and would need to be rebuilt. Whilst the loss of this attractive dwelling is extremely regretful, however, the council accepts that the findings of the structural engineer's report and consider that the rebuild of this dwelling is justified in this instance. The demolition of this building will result in harm to the significance of a non-designated heritage asset. It is considered that provided historic fabric from the existing building, such as the bricks, is salvaged and reused in the new building, the harm is then justified as it would provide a public health and safety benefit. The proposed replacement dwelling is effectively in 2 parts. You have the front building referred to as the main dwelling and the timber-clad building to the rear linked main building by a small single-story glazed link. The main dwelling is to be constructed of brick and is to replicate the form, design, detailing and appearance of the existing building, albeit with very slight differences in height. The ridge height is proposed to be 6.6 metres compared to the existing 6.2 metres. The eaves height along the southeast elevation is proposed to be 3.7 metres compared to the existing 3.5. The eaves height on the northwest elevation is proposed to be 2.2 metres compared to the existing 2.1. 2 sets of amended plans were received to address concerns from the conservation officer they had regarding design of the link building, which is the timber-clad building to the rear. The first set, received in February 2023, addressed the concerns raised by the conservation officer in terms of the link building and the location of the proposed replacement dwelling, which the conservation officer requested that the proposed dwelling move closer to the road to match the footprint of the existing dwelling. However, a second set of amended plans, which are the plans subject to this decision, were received on the 8th of June. This moved the proposed replacement dwelling further into the plot to provide improved visibility displays for the existing access, which would improve the public and highway safety. The proposed plans, which set the replacement dwelling back from the highway, is considered to have a less than substantial harm on the conservation area. Where a proposal would cause less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, paragraph 202 of the NPPF requires that determining the application, the less than substantial harm must be weighed against the public benefit of the proposal, including where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. Highway safety is also a public benefit, so should be weighed against the less than substantial harm. Overall, whilst there is a loss of a non-designated heritage asset set back from the road, suitable justification has been submitted in the form of a structural viability report. This viability of a building for reuse is a material planning consideration in considering its replacement, including in a conservation area. It is accepted that the setting back of the proposed dwelling would have an impact on the conservation area. but this again would be less than substantial and is therefore not considered to result in a significant or overwhelming harm to the conservation area. Whilst the dwelling will be situated further into the plot and moved to the southeast, closer to the neighbouring dwelling known as Larkspur, the proposed dwelling will be located 4.5 metres further into the plot and 0.5 metres closer to the neighbouring dwelling. An additional first floor window is proposed to the southeast elevation, and this will face the neighbouring dwelling's Larkspur front garden. It is also noted that the neighbouring dwelling does have a conservatory to the side elevation closest to the application site. However, due to the angle and the distance of over 15 metres along with the boundary screening, this is not considered to have a significant impact on neighbouring amenity. Overall, the altered position of the replacement dwelling has been carefully considered, and given that the repositioning would allow for more improved visibility displays and sight lines, which is in turn would improve overall highway safety compared to the less than significant harm of repositioning the dwelling would have on the conservation area. Therefore, when assessing the application as a whole, the planning balance weighs more favourably to the overall improvement in highway safety, given the likelihood of increased use of the access. On the screen shows the proposed street scene on how the dwelling will sit amongst the property to the left, which is Cherry Cottage, and the property on the right, which is Larkspur. On the screen now is the proposed ground and first floor plans. The additional first floor window will serve bedroom 4, which is on the top to the right, just in case you can't see it. All the windows for the link building there'll be no windows on the side elevation, and they will at first floor, and the windows will face to the garden. This is the existing dwelling as seen on the screen, and it's currently based against the road. The proposal will be for a similar design, but located 2.4 metres back from the road. This is the street view showing the conservation area and the impact it has right against the road. The northwest elevation showing the access point. And again, a close-up of the access point. And this is an outbuilding located to the side. Half of the building, which is on the screen, is owned by the neighbouring dwelling Cherry Cottage. And if you can see the change in the roof on the image, that section is in the ownership of the applicant for this site. These images on site are the dwelling as currently on site. And this is the current rear elevation. And this is the view of Larkspur and the conservatory, which was the concern when the committee members went out on site. As you can see from the images, you can see the current derelict state of the property. And this is a view from Larkspur from the front entrance. And this is a view from the patio by the conservatory of Larkspur looking at the application site. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goddard, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As mentioned by Cheyenne Kirby, the property does have an existing access on the northern side that serves one parking space. The proposal before you is to provide a route through to the rear of the building to provide 3 car parking spaces. Therefore, that is an increase in the amount of vehicle movements coming out of an existing access that has virtually no sight lines onto Front Street whatsoever. Therefore, your highway officers sought to have the building set back to at least provide some sight lines to the south across the site. The access between the proposed dwelling and the neighbouring property's garage to the north was also considered too narrow. So we also sought a wider access to go through to the rear of the property. So that involved moving the building, as Cheyenne Kirby has mentioned, 2.4 metres back from the road and 0.5 metres to the south to widen the access overall. Your highway officers are therefore satisfied with the provision of the access, although I do appreciate that the planning officer, Cheyenne Kirby, had to strike a balance between the requirements of the local highway authority and the views of conservation officers and others. During construction, it needs to be added, there will be a temporary access on the southern part of the site that will enable materials to be delivered during construction. This is within the construction management plan that has been submitted. As I said, this is a temporary access and will be stopped up and reinstated upon completion. This is all within secured by conditions that are contained in your pack. So therefore, highways have no objection to this proposal.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to now go on to speakers. Before you all come up, remember the 5-minute rule that I mentioned earlier. You'll get a warning at 1 minute, not a warning, a hint at 1 minute. Your time's almost up, and then 10 seconds. First up, I have from the Parish Council, Sue Tulloch, Chair of East Garston Parish Council. I believe you're here. Oh, there we go. Just press the little man with a speaker type symbol and the red light should come on. There you go.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. There are 4 key points I'd like to make in relation to this application. The development of Green Gate.
Just 1 second. Could you just about 10 centimetres to your right, just so you're speaking into the microphone? It'll be nice and clear. Thank you very much.
You're going to start my 5 minutes again.
No. Do you want to go 5 centimetres your left now? But don't speak into them directly. They don't really pick it up very well.
I have stopped the stop clock. Thank you. The development of Green Gates is highly controversial, and across the 2 applications, we've had 27 villagers have raised concerns. Green Gate sits, as already been mentioned, in the East Garston Conservation Area and AONB. As a parish council and village, we're disappointed to be losing such a prominent heritage asset, especially as other heritage properties in the village have been preserved rather than destroyed. Therefore, any building that replaces it must enhance the conservation area. The conservation consultation response was clear. The footprint of Greengate should not be repositioned in order to protect the cohesive street scene and character of the conservation area. The Parish Council fully supports this view. We feel the committee report overlooks its conservation recommendations and accepts that losing the historic street scene within a conservation area without demonstrating any significant public or environmental benefit of doing so. Second point, access. Again, already been mentioned, there's currently no vehicle access to the rear of the property. The application justifies the relocation of the main dwelling to the southeast to provide this access. However, space to deliver access in excess of the highway's minimum already exists on the southeast side of the cottage, so the Parish Council don't understand the necessity to change the footprint of the main dwelling. In addition, the exact measurement of this relocation has been repeatedly challenged as inaccurate. In order to provide highways minimum access, the main dwelling will have to move almost 1 metre closer to the neighbouring property and not 5 metres as quoted. This should have been visibly obvious to the committee during the site visit. Therefore, no public benefit can be demonstrated by this relocation. However, the negative outcomes include adverse impact to the street scene and character of the conservation area, adverse impact on neighbouring residential amenity, and the need to doctor a shared outbuilding into an unorthodox shape. Third point, location. The application justifies moving the main dwelling back in the plot by over 2.5 metres to improve visibility displays. The regulatory nature of the highway's response does not address the particularities of this individual development. The subsequent reasoning by the committee report to overrule conservation criteria to deliver highway and public safety is extremely overstated. The committee would have observed at the site visit that minimal sightline improvement will be achieved by moving the main dwelling back, and therefore minimum improvement on highway safety. This is a quiet single track rural lane. No cottages have sightlines here, and removal of the pinch point, which naturally slows traffic, will provide space to encourage on-street parking. Finally, design. The design of the application is in two parts: a two-storey main dwelling connected to a two-storey link building, or to be clear, a two-storey extension, as currently no built form exists in this space. There is no subservience between the two buildings. The application results in a 62% increase in floor space. No mention is made in the committee report of the West Berks District Local Plan or the Housing Site Allocations DBT, in particular policy C7, which states the replacement dwelling should be proportionate in size and scale to the existing dwelling, which it is not, and that it shouldn't have an adverse impact on the character and its setting in the wider landscape, which it does. The two separate buildings also give rise to the possibility of two separate dwellings in the future. There is no mention of conditions to prevent this. Historically, East Gartham planning applications have enjoyed a robust approach from West Berkshire Council to ensure a consistent and uniform use of planning policy in line with the village conservation area status. This application does not appear to have received the same level of scrutiny, particularly as there are serious breaches of policy in terms of conservation, design, and neighbouring amenity, which in the past have resulted in refusal. The planning balance and conclusion in section 7 of the committee report gives highway safety as outweighing all other considerations and contraventions of policy. On a very quiet village lane at the centre of a conservation area, this seems astonishing. If planning is granted on these grounds, it would be unprecedented and in complete odds with planning approval to date. The Parish Council would like this application to be refused in its current form and request further amendments to ensure it complies fully with all aspects of planning policy. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. If you just stay there for a moment. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just make a couple of comments in relation to what you said, and you obviously made a comment, it was controversial and loss of heritage value, but you also made the comment about public safety overstated. Now, perhaps you'd like to just make a comment in relationship to what was said earlier, that it was an unsafe building, and I'd like you to put it in that
Councillor,
context, please.
could you put that in the form of a question rather than asking for comments, please?
Well, yes, you made it quite clear, didn't you, that it was overstated, and is that your view completely different from the view of the building being unsafe?
Okay, when I was talking about the safety being overstated, I wasn't talking to the building itself. I was talking about the highways, safety on the highway.
Thank you. Sorry, you made that clear.
Councillor Vickers.
You obviously have emphasised the conservation officer's report, and the case officer concluded her remarks by saying that this was a compromise between conservation and highways. Would you not agree that conservation has to take consideration that what is built today, and we're not leaving places in aspic, as it were, just because they're conservation areas. Development is allowed, but if a development is more appropriate in the age of widespread use of vehicles, concern for climate change, etc., the alternative to not allowing a building which is structurally unsound, would you not agree, is to allow a building to just become more and more derelict? So that would not surely enhance, let alone protect, let alone enhance a conservation area.
Okay, we're not questioning that something needs to be done on the site. Our point is that something can be done to not lose the heritage value of the site. Nobody is disputing that a modest extension should be acceptable, but it's the size and scale and height of this building that we object to.
But our policies require new buildings to have parking space.
Councillor, please not debate questions.
No, this is leading to a question, if you don't mind, Chairman.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree that if we're going to allow a rebuild, then it has to allow for parking, exiting and entering into a property in the modern 21st century way, whereas the rest of the buildings may not have been built with that in mind.
I absolutely agree that there needs to be some parking, but as we said, there's already access to one side of the building. So we don't really understand why the building has to be moved.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I just have a couple of minor things. You said over 2.5 meters back. What evidence do you have for over moving over 2.5 meters back? Was the officers have said 2.5 meters back? Is there any evidence you have that the number is wrong, or were you just trying to emphasize something?
I think I just said, oh, well, it is, I think it is.
Well, I wrote down over 2.5 meters back, which are the only 2.5 meters I'm aware of. We'll ask officers to go. You also said 5 meters, and I assume you meant half a meter.
Half a meter, I meant, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just,
Sorry.
just make sure we're on. The final one from me is you said also minimum visibility improvement. Could you clarify or not clarify? How do you stand behind that statement?
Well, I think if you brought back up the photos from the lane.
Okay, could we do that, please? Just one moment. It takes a few seconds.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so if you look at the picture, the hedge on this side, together with the cherry cottage wall on the other side, the visibility is hardly going to be improved at all by moving the building back.
2.5 meters. Okay, so you want to stand by that statement?
Yeah, but our other point about that is if you do move the building back, as opposed to making it safer, that's going to encourage cars to park on that stretch of road, which will then make it, exactly the same situation as we're in here.
I'm sure the highways officer will be questioned on that later.
Okay.
But anybody else? No. Well, thank you very much indeed for that nice and clear presentation. Next, we have some objectors. In person, I believe we have Anthony Banfield, Lindsay Mason, and Martin Wright. Just two of you coming to the. Okay, if you wish to be asked questions, would you mind being close to the mic so we know you're part of it? And could you say who's who, please, just for the record?
Yes, I'm Anthony Banfield. I occupy my own Cherry Cottage, the adjoining property.
Okay, just your name so we know who you are for the record.
That's it. And together we represent the objectors.
Thank you very much. We've got 5 minutes between you all, yes?
Fine.
Right, ready, steady, off you go.
Fine. Green Gates was occupied as a private dwelling actually until 2020. And I don't wish to reiterate the parish council's submissions, but we totally endorse their comments. We'd suggest that the committee report doesn't fully address a number of relevant matters relating to, firstly, disproportionate size and scale of the proposed development, secondly, sight lines and vehicular access, and thirdly, residential amenity. So the application does not comply with policy regarding its size and scale. According to the CIL, it shows an increase in floor area of 62%. Which was not actually mentioned, I think, in the committee report. This seems to contravene policy C7 of housing site allocations and definitely does not comply with policy ENV 23 of the West Berks District Local Plan Supplementary Guidance for Replacement Dwellings point 3.3.1, which states that more than a 50% increase in size is considered disproportionate. The proposed development comprises a main dwelling plus an additional 2-storey extension, having a pitch tiled roof referred to as the Link building, linked by a single glazed corridor. Both buildings being 2-storey are obviously a lot taller than the existing 1.5-storey cottage. This 2-storey separate extension, again, seems to contravene ENV 24 regarding extensions to dwellings in the countryside. 4.2 reads, it's important that proposed extensions are subordinate to the existing dwelling and not capable of being severed from it. To prevent it becoming two separate dwellings, the rear the 3-bedroom main dwelling and the rear 2-story extension being separate, 1-bedroom dwelling or holiday let, it's suggested that if this is granted, a condition should be imposed that the extension is ancillary and subservient to the main dwelling house. Sightlines, despite what it shows on the old version of the plan attached to the applicant's construction method statement, the latest plan provides for only one sightline, shown blue, to the southeast across the frontage of Green Gates. To the northwest, there's no improvement in visibility since it remains obstructed by the walls which cannot be demolished as they form part of the curtilage of the adjoining Grade 2 listed cottage, Cherry Cottage. So in order to provide vehicular access, there's proposes demolition of part of the Grade 2 listed property, Cherry Cottage's outhouse. And I would ask whether in fact that possibly is also listed. I'll hand over now to Lindsay to talk about amenity.
Okay, good evening. I'm extremely disappointed by the lack of scrutiny given to neighbouring amenity in the committee report. The supposition of 0.6.25 is wholly incorrect, and the proposal does not comply with planning policy. The committee report fails to mention any of the key policies which regard the protection of neighbouring amenity, the West Berkshire District Local Plan OVS 5 and the West Berkshire Housing Site Allocations DPD Policy C6 and C7. Policy C6 states, care will be exercised to ensure that a proposed extension will not give rise to increased overlooking, be of an overbearing nature, or have a serious adverse impact on habitable rooms of adjacent properties. The addition of an extra upstairs window on the southeast elevation of the main replacement dwelling and a separate new 2-story extension building, both repositioned back and across in the plot, will significantly and adversely impact on the private residential amenity I currently enjoy. This does not comply with planning policy. No consideration has been given to ensure sufficient separation and amenity standards are maintained for my home, particularly as the application includes a new extension directly adjacent to my older property. The 2-story replacement dwelling will be 14.8 metres from my sitting room window. The separate 2-story extension will be 12 metres from my patio doors. According to the West Berkshire Quality Design SPD, policy dictates a minimum requirement of 21 metres. My glass roof conservatory, open plan kitchen, diner and living room will be overlooked where they currently are not. The double-storey extension will be 6.2 metres of solid timbered wall where there is currently no built form at all, and this will be directly in front of my conservatory. Both these do not comply with planning policy. I hope the site visit demonstrated the adverse impact this application would have on my property if approved in its current form, and I hope the committee will request further amendment to ensure compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You just remain at the speakers for a moment or two. Members, questions of clarification, please. Anybody? Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned overlooking. From my recollection of the site visit, there are no windows overlooking your property. Is that incorrect?
That is incorrect. So when the main dwelling moves
Sorry, again,
back,
could you speak to the microphone? Sorry.
When the main dwelling, moves back 2.5 metres in the plot, it brings the upper, because also it's raising up, it brings the 3 upper windows into play, where currently there's not one window at the end, there's an extra one added. That will look directly down onto my patio, and I think Chairman Abbs asked that question on the patio, and it was confirmed that window would look directly onto my patio.
Thank you.
Any other members? Any other questions? I have a small one. You mentioned percentages, and then you stated a particular policy.
That's correct.
Do you know that policy is out of date, and it went out of date in 2012?
No, we didn't, but I did mention policy C7 as well.
You mentioned others as well. But,
yes, which also takes into account proportionality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else? Oh, thank you very much for that nice, clear presentation. So we're now on to the agent. I believe we have a Rob McLennan, HSW Limited, joining us via Zoom.
We do, Chairman. He's just joining the meeting.
Okay.
I think he's dropped off, Chairman.
Okay. I'm willing to give it 60 seconds, but if he doesn't return, unfortunately, we have to move on. You're okay to reverse the order? Okay, all right.
I have Rob's report here.
Sorry, who are you, sir?
Howard Porter.
Howard Porter, but you're not on the speakers list.
No, I'm standing in for Rob if the electronics don't work. I have a copy of his report here.
Yeah, just bear with me 1 second, please.
Mr. McLennan is back in the meeting, but he just needs to start his camera.
It may not be necessary. 1 second.
Should I hang on just in case?
Well, we would have to spend standing orders because you're not on the speakers list and a few other things. So hopefully he will come on screen in a moment. So. I know some for the members of some of this may seem slightly pedantic, but this is a quasi judicial process. So therefore we try and keep it as close to correct as we possibly can.
I can see he has no audio at the moment, so I think there may be some technical issues.
Okay. So members, we now have to take a vote on suspending standing orders to allow this gentleman to speak or not. Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I think we should suspend standing orders. They clearly thought about this possibility. And it's really just that we didn't have a second name, isn't it? Really?
Indeed, yeah. For future notes, please, to agents. Anyway, okay, all members, are we, can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Clark, all those in favour? Okay, the orders are suspended. Away you go. You still have to get the 5 minutes.
This is what he would have said. Is this on? Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. Obviously, we're pleased with the officer's report and conclusion, which we wholeheartedly agree, and which we feel accurately reflects the culmination of many months of detailed negotiations and related revisions to arrive at the scheme before you tonight. This property was first marketed in November 2020, had 39 viewings, 12 offers to proceed. Each of these interested parties had surveys undertaken, and all of these inquiries fell away, ultimately, even after a £75,000 reduction in the asking price, due to the compromised structural condition of the house, its lack of basic services and insulation, which made it unfit for lending purposes, and which compounded its other readily identifiable issues of lack of off-street parking and unsafe on-street parking due to the building's very close proximity to the road edge. It is accepted that the response to poor condition of heritage property should, of course, be to retain and repair where possible, as reflected in long-established conservation philosophy and policy. However, in this instance, the advice from the structural engineer appointed by the present applicant concluded that it would have been necessary to remove all roof coverings and structure and rebuild the leaning walls, adding a new roof structure to align with the newly squared external walls. Existing foundations, and there aren't any, and the existing ground floor makeup would also not mean modern building regulations could be met. Effectively, therefore, renovation is not an option. I just add in here 300 height was mentioned. That was for floodplain purposes. It's the only reason it's 300 higher. The site was purchased by the applicant only after obtaining a structural engineer's report establishing its plot-only status in March 2022. And since this time, the current plans were developed in conjunction with advice from council officers and by using highly respected firm of local architects, Fowlers, in the knowledge that the replacement principle also accords with local development plan policy for such properties within settlement boundaries. Independent professional advice was secured to support the proposals from structural engineers as outlined, historic building consultants, flood, drainage, both foul and surface water. They have been mixed in conversation, I hear, and arboricultural consultants and ecology and landscape advisors. All these related professional reports form part of the application's package of documents. Early advice fed into a scheme that was initially submitted to the planning department as a pre-application inquiry, from which early officer feedback was taken fully into account to amend the scheme to address concerns raised. Since the pre-application response and over the past 12 months as part of the formal considerations for this application, we've continued to refine the proposal, including its design and siting in response to ongoing dialogue with council officers addressing heritage impact considerations, access, parking, highway safety issues, flood and drainage matters, and matters relating to trees and ecology. The final scheme before you today is a result of these discussions and presents a design that faithfully and very closely reflects the design appearance and materials of the existing house. I might add it is 1.5 stories, not 2 stories, which has been thrown in this evening. But with the addition of a lightweight linked outbuilding styled extension to accommodate an open plan kitchen family room required to make the project workable and therefore give the property a secure future as a family home commensurate with its large plot size. The rebuild allows for the new home to be highly insulated and to incorporate modern facilities and services, including sustainable drainage, mains drainage, and measures to secure energy efficiencies of domestic hot water and heating, etc., via an air source heat pump and an EV charging point. The 300 mm increase in eaves height results from necessary uplift to finished floor level due to flood requirements. Provision of setback and slight adjustment in the proposed footprint, 0.5 metre, allows for the provision of access to off-street parking and turning with a plot, which in turn allows the best achievable sight lines upon exit to be secured, generating significant highway safety gains. It does also assist the adjoining property, by the way. We feel that we have arrived at a scheme that, on balance, now successfully addresses all planning matters raised in dialogue with the council and which secures a positive outcome for this difficult site. The end result will be a traditional cottage-style dwelling designed as a replica of existing, but built to modern-day standards to meet current expectations. I'll leave it there then. 2 more paragraphs, which says the same thing.
All right, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that. That's very nice of you. Members, anybody you'd like to ask? Oh, sorry, could you come back to the lectern, please, sir? Just in case there are any. I don't know. That's a good question. Members, would anybody like to try and get clarification of a person that's not here? With difficulty, yes. How familiar are you with this application and the work that was gone into that?
Fairly, yes.
Okay, so you feel able to answer questions?
I can try.
Great. So there you go. Members, any questions? Councillor Hooker, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to establish the validity of the structural report. In your knowledge, with all the storms we've had, winds and all the rest of it, having been told this building's not safe, was there any damage done to that property in those storms?
Which particular storms are you talking about? Are you talking about water coming off the site or damaging the structure?
Wind that's been through.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Hooker. I don't remember this being part of the.
He mentioned the structural survey. I'm just trying to get some idea.
Okay.
They're saying it's not structurally sound. I'm trying to get an idea.
Well, that's a fully qualified structural engineer with PI cover writing that report. So what are you asking me? Was his report?
I'll ask you the question.
Well,
Was
we're
there any
certainly not
damage
gonna-
done-
we're
Was there
certainly
any
not
damage
gonna-
done during the storm?
Not that I'm aware of, but I haven't looked around it carefully. But we're
that's
talking
fine.
structural damage, not wind damage to superficial parts of the building.
Structural damage to the building, the roof.
Okay, it's not debate. This is a questions and.
I find it difficult to answer the question. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Anybody, any other members got a question? Yeah, you did mention, oh, sorry, Councillor Clark, after you.
Thank you. I've heard different heights mentioned a few times, 2 stories and 1.5 stories. Which of these is correct?
Perhaps the planning officer will put the drawings up.
Well, we'll obviously clarification of the offices.
Well,
You did
they've already been
mention-
put up.
Well, indeed, we'll have a look again in a bit. Plot only status was 3 words that you used. Please expand on that for me.
Plot only status.
You said plot only status.
Oh, that's just establishing the point that the structure has no value.
So does it?
In-
Well, okay,
in
so
terms
fine,
of-
I'll seek clarification from the
In
officers
terms of the
what it
structure
really
that's
means.
there.
Okay.
If an structural engineer says it's got to be taken down, then the structure has no value.
Thank you very much. Any other members like to ask a question, please? No, thank you very much for your time and stepping in to the breach there. Next up, we have.
Obviously, we're resuming standing orders.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Do we need a vote on that? I think we do, don't we? Who would like to propose resuming standing? Thank you very much, Councillor Wollaston, seconded by Captain Clark. All those in favour? Thank you very much, and we're off again. So, ward member is next. Councillor Clive Hooker. Thank you very much. I'm sure a man of your experiences realise you only have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And on behalf of the committee, may I thank East Garston Parish Council Chair for coming along this evening. I'm sure we all appreciate that. So often we get applications come and the Parish Council don't turn up. And also for the excellent presentation of the residents of East Garston. But members, before I start, I'd like to advise the committee that I've not been approached to call this matter in. I've not been lobbied by the Parish Council, any objectors, supporters, or the applicant. And I've not predetermined this application, and I look forward to the debate later. Green Gates on Front Street in East Garston is located in my ward of Downlands. And I'm sure you will agree with me that following our site visit last week, it is the idyllic English village with rustic architecture, with properties constructed mainly of handmade bricks, clay tiles, thatch roofs along that Front Street stretch. In addition, many of the houses are adjacent to one of the country's revered chalk rivers, the River Lambourne. Hopefully, having set the scene, you will be considering the proposed development in context to its location, as well as its design and size. Members, I ask you in your deliberations later to consider the following issues. As I've myself read the papers, listened to the residents on Thursday at the site meeting, and looked at the site myself. And following that, I do sympathise with the 19 objectors and the Parish Council sentiments, as these are people who will have to live with this committee's decision, should it be one of approval. East Garston, as I know, is a close-knit community who are enthusiastic on retaining their heritage. Green Gates is designated as a non-designated heritage building dating back to possibly the 18th century. Having been in the past, the village post office, when you consider that, it would have conveyed news back and beyond the First World War. It's part of the heritage and fabric of this village. The village is not registered, the building, is not registered in the West Berkshire local conservation list of heritage assets due to its early stages of development. But I ask you to consider that if this had been fully established and this building had been included in it, would the conservation officer require it to be renovated and not demolished? In this case, it's a very fine line. I ask you to consider also the slight irritation of yet another application before this committee, where the development has not communicated with the community or the Parish Council. If it had, maybe many of these objections lodged could have been overcome. I ask you also to consider that sites like this one are certainly very much sought after by developers, giving them the opportunity to demolish small dilapidated dwellings and to get as big a replacement on the plot as possible. With this in mind, we are directed in these instances to consider whether the proposed development and replacement building is proportionate and sympathetic to the original. I've looked at the plans and I suggest to you that this is approximately 60% bigger than the original house. And I'm sure you will agree is not proportionate. And with the 2-storey annex on the back, effectively making it a linked self-contained unit, it is not sympathetic. And had the developer not included this, it may have been more acceptable to the community. As there has been no communication by the developer with a recent Larkspur resident next door, this has caused much distress and anxiety, which could have been avoided. And finally, moving on to the building backing onto the road and and finally moving the moving of the building back from the road and nearer to Larkspur purely accommodates the dreaded car and has drastically changed the rural street scene, which is a great concern to the residents of the village.
1 minute.
Thank you. It could be considered why highways have had such a effect on turning over the conservation officer's decision. And that does concern me somewhat. Conservation in the area of outstanding natural beauty is always something that should be seriously considered. And in this case, the highway officer has actually changed that decision. So I ask the committee to give these points due course, as I've outlined, and consider them in the appropriate way and come to the appropriate decision following the debate. Thank you, members.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions of clarification? Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hooker. You mentioned about the design. Have you got any particular concerns about the materials and about the look of the building?
Yeah, thank you. Two issues really. One, to be honest, if this goes ahead and the developer, I can see no point at all in us asking that bricks should be renewed. I don't think we can actually condition where they're going to be put on the front face, the rear face, so I can't really see the effectiveness of reusing the bricks. And on the second issue, on the building at the back being wooden clad, dissimilar to the construction of the main house. But with regard to the design of the house and its layout and its size as a two-bedroom house, I've got no issues.
Okay. And just a second question, if I may, Chairman. In the structural engineer's report, it acknowledges that there'd be a loss of a non-designated heritage asset, but they said in order to make good the property, to make it more structurally sound, you would in effect lose a non-heritage asset anyway, because you would have to do so much work to it. It would completely change the building. Do you accept that conclusion?
I'm of the belief on these things. If you buy a property, you obviously take on a risk. If you take on a listed building, it might be in a dilapidated state, but you wouldn't be allowed to knock it to the ground and rebuild it. I think this is one of the risks that this developer has taken on, and this is why he's brought this application to committee. It could have been destined, if it had been an asset, a heritage asset, that the conservation officer may have said, you've taken on that risk, you've got to sort out this building and retain it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members have any questions? No, well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Councillor Hooker. All right, with that, we need to go, members, clarification of officers' comments. Hey, who would like to, Councillor Wollaston, please?
Can I just ask Mr. Goddard why the other entrance was not considered for car parking access?
So, Councillor, you're asking whether an access is not provided on the southern side of the building. Is that correct?
Correct.
Unfortunately, I, along with the rest of the committee, we need to assess the proposal that is before us. And the proposal has provided the access on the northern side of the building, probably to provide greater amenity space, I would suspect, but the planning officers may be able to comment on that. I think that's the best I can say at the moment, Chairman.
Do you mind if I ask myself? So what you're saying is you looked at what was presented to you, not at all the possible alternatives there may have been.
Yes, Chairman, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
That is what we do.
Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, I'd like to sort of follow on from what the ward member was referring to the use of. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Use of the bricks in view of probably the number of bricks that will be required on this new building, if it's accepted, is clearly not going to be the amount of bricks which will be found from or recuperated or suitable to use from an existing building. In view of what the ward member was making a comment, what side of the building or whether it's front, rear, or each or whatever availability would be suited, would the bricks have to be enough to cover one side of the wall, or would it be enough to actually mix in with other bricks which could be made available? Because clearly the brick situation at the moment, I think, is a very difficult one. And I think a lot of different types of bricks are hard to come by. So that's a question of the officer.
So did you pick that question? That was the question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, councillor. So it was also on our update sheet about the bricks. So until the building is taken down, we wouldn't know how many can be salvaged. But the condition for bricks, as suggested on the recommendation, is that any new bricks would need to be submitted and approved by ourselves. And I note that that on site it was debated on elevations, which we could condition the reused bricks to be on. However, my recommendation would be that any new bricks to be used once they've been approved by us, by the council, would be better off mixed in. So you get the mixture of reused and new bricks to even out the elevation, just rather than leaving one whole elevation as new and the others as old. It may be better to have a more even mix in order to help the building blend with the conservation area.
Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, if I may, it wasn't actually covered in the officer's presentation, but it's in her report. And it's an issue which I think is important considering how close we are to the river, and it's admitted this is in a floodplain. It says in para 633 that the sequential approach in matters to do with rebuilding in a property in the floodplain will be strictly applied. But my question is, normally we look at all alternative sites across the entire district. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, and I don't think we should, but why, if this is being strictly applied, was that not done in this case as we normally do?
Thank you, Chairman. The report contains a number of standard paragraphs of information regarding various legislation matters which we're obliged to report to the committee in order to essentially prevent us from unsuccessful JRs, judicial reviews. However, this application site is not within flood zone 2 or 3, and therefore there's no requirements for sequential testing or the exception test under the sequential test to be applied in this circumstance.
Thank you. It does say flood risk, but you're talking about fluvial flood risk, aren't you? Which is zone 2 and 3. Okay, thank you.
Okay, if I may, I believe you wish to make a comment about C7. You want to jump in at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important in order to prevent a misunderstanding, and because this is a particularly complex and difficult element of the way that our local plan policies function. The housing site allocation development plan document was adopted in 2017. I'm afraid I gave slightly incorrect advice that it actually superseded the policy on ENV 23 on percentage increases in 2018, but its ENV 23 is still quite considerably out of date. The housing site allocation DPD provides a framework for determining, amongst other things, housing in the countryside. And policy C1 of that framework identifies the settlement boundaries for development that is considered to be in settlement. Now, in settlement in planning terms means not in the countryside. Obviously, it might physically be in the countryside, but in terms of our strategic planning, it's considered to be outside of a countryside area. Then you follow on from policy C1, which identifies those in settlement locations, onto C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8. And members and the parish council have all, and objectors have referred to policy C7. But policy C7 is one of these subsidiary policies which refer to development in the countryside. So in settlement, we do not seek for redevelopment of a site to be a proportionate redevelopment. The presumption, as we say in planning terms, is in favour of development. And as you'll note from your case officer's report, this is a site that is in settlement. I completely understand the misunderstanding. It is incredibly complex, but my officer's advice to you is that C7 isn't relevant for the purposes of determining this application. And sorry, Chairman, I've taken up a lot of time, but I do need to cover this. In respect of demolition, it should be noted that there is other legislation in respect to the building regulations that covers demolition, and that would supersede the planning list of building consents and conservation areas Act 1990 in respect of condemning a building for demolition where it was not fit for safe occupation. In this case, we've consulted with the conservation officer, who has not contested the findings of the applicant's agent that the building would not be fit viably for redevelopment for purposes of residential dwelling.
Councillor Looker, I think you were next.
Thank you. One for the officer. It's with regard to the statutory consultation that was done on the previous application, and the conservation officer had no objection because the building was going to be on the original footprint. Can you advise me where I find any comment from the conservation officer on this new application not being on the footprint, and how that was virtually, let's say, the original decision overruled by Highways, as my presentation, that Highways took precedent over the conversation officer's requirements.
Thank you, councillor. The conservation section in the agenda that is taken directly from the conservation officer themselves. And the original amendments were for the link building to be reduced and for the footprint of the main dwelling to be back where it is currently. However, obviously, when discussions with Highways suggested the moving of the dwelling to where it is as proposed, as we're currently deciding tonight, she came back with comments saying that the moving of the building against the planning balance of the reuse of the building and the Highways comments, so the bringing back the building into being new, even though it'd be new one, but using it again would be would have a more substantial weight and less than significant harm getting than the rest of the building. That makes sense. I've sort of lost my track there. Sorry, councillor.
Well answered. If I may, another on the little garage at the back of the listed garage, that's going. Presumably, the fact it's attached is presumably not an extension of the listing, but equally from the drawings, it shows sort of a horizontal line going from the forward front of the garage to the back of the. Is the wall going? We've got no indication of what the construction of that roof is or what it's going to look like in an area of outstanding natural beauty.
Okay, I can clarify that the garage building that's part owned by Cherry Cottage and the application site is not curtilage listed. This was confirmed by the conservation officer. It was not part of the original curtilage of Cherry Cottage and is not curtilage listed. As seen on the block plan, the diagonal line, that's because they're going to partially demolish the building in order to make sure that there is enough space between these two buildings for access for cars.
And you're happy with the detail of what that's going to look like when it's finished? It's got a roof, is it open? Do we know?
Yeah, it's got a roof. However, there hasn't been plans submitted just because the building's already existing. So if they want to demolish part of it, obviously some of this can. But yeah, we haven't had plans of this as it's existing.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, two questions for Shane, if I may. The first one, we heard reference to different heights, 1.5 or 2 stories. Can you confirm what is correct? And the second question was regarding overlooking, because the objectors did mention that they felt their properties would be overlooked, whereas your report said that they were a suitable distance away from neighbouring properties, again, which is correct.
Thank you, councillor. I can put the proposed drawings back on the screen.
Please do so, yeah.
So it's a 1.5 story dwelling, and the link building to the rear is also 1.5 stories. So we call them 1.5 stories because the first floor is within the roof rather than 2 distinct floors and then the roof. The first floor is within the roofscape. So this is why we call it 1.5 stories. If that has that clarified that emblem. And in terms, I do actually have I can show you the block plan as well, which will show. So it's probably quite small, but you can see the outline of the proposed windows to the southeast. Again, it's probably quite small on that image. I'm sorry. And then you can see the distance to the neighbour's conservatory, which again I have. Let me just scroll. I have actually measured this once it plays ball. So on this plan, the new first floor window will be 15.63 meters from the neighbouring conservatory. And whilst this is closer than the existing building, due to the angles and the distance, it's been not determined as significant impact on neighbouring amenity. I do understand that residents have raised the issue in terms of 21 meters distance. However, this is back-to-back distance and not side-to-side. So this is only SPD guidance of the 21 meters. And again, that's back-to-back, whereas this is side-on. So there isn't any formal minimum distance when they're side-on like this relationship. There's no side windows to that link building. They're all facing the garden. So it is noted that the first floor window will be closer. However, it's still, as measured on this plan, 15.63 meters in distance. Is that?
Councillor Calder.
Thank you, Chairman. As we know, this is in a nutrient neutrality zone, and according to paragraph 6.39, there was a nutrient budget statement. It says here that it won't result in new or additional overnight accommodation, but it's like for like. But this, can you confirm that this is a 4-bed instead of a 3, and therefore there is potential for more occupants, which would have a positive impact on nutrient escape?
Yeah, thank you, councillor. Yes, I can confirm it will be in an additional bedroom accommodations. So it will go from 3 to 4 bedrooms, but it's just an additional to the existing house and is not caught as an additional NNZ issue. And because there's minimal drainage on site, if not any on site at the moment, the nutrient officer has deemed that anything that will be put in place in terms of will be better, because I believe of what we recall in site, there's actually currently no bathrooms or anything at the site at present. So anything is currently better than what is there. now.
Yeah, do you mind if I just jump in on that one? This fisherman lack of basic services was, so you're saying there's no toilets, no baths, nothing on site at the moment?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers.
I just wanted to go back to the distance between Larkspur and could you confirm, officers, please, officer, that the conservatory in Larkspur, I think, was only a single-storey extension, and that's where the lady spends a lot of time. She'd told us on the site visit, but is that the only window that is, I think you call it a habitable room, isn't it? It's either a bedroom or a sort of living room that matters in this respect. So that would be even further if there is a window on the upper story on that rear part of the building.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll answer this. In terms of habitable rooms, there is case law indicating that a conservatory or indeed a kitchen would be, sorry, I'm throwing in kitchen, but I don't really need to. A conservatory would be considered to be a habitable space. It's a space where somebody would be gaining amenity, and we should, of course, consider the amenity of areas that people would use as private amenity spaces. But your officer's recommendation is on the basis that the relationship between the windows is not changing significantly. It is an oblique angle looking down there. So we are of the view that there isn't a significant level of additional impact on that private amenity space and the conservatory.
May I ask the officers to go back to what exists today and tell us what the distance is and the angle is from any window that might have possibly overlooked the conservatory today? So in other words, you're saying it's not significant, but what is it? Or is it?
Apologies. Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got the image there on site, but the current window would be located where
is it where the middle window is by any chance?
It would actually be further away than that.
No, I'm not.
Then the middle window is. It would be further to the north.
Well, I'm looking at Google here, and I can make out the window. So I'm hoping that it looks to me, and I'd like confirmation from you that we're talking about an angle that is effectively the middle window or the left-hand side of the middle window as I look on that screen there. And of course, it's come closer. So it's more of an oblique angle. Well, definitely an oblique angle there, but it is further away. So actually the impact of this new window, this extra window, and closer is actually quite significantly different than, I mean, I'm looking for you to confirm or,
yeah,
or
so
not. I mean,
the existing nearest first floor window back from the road, because I had to pick a point that was consistent, was 6.2 meters from the road, from the edge of the road. So where the edge of the existing dwelling sits. The proposed nearest first floor window will then sit 11.1 meters in, so 6 meters over from the existing window on site. So it would be just under, about 5 meters closer.
And less and less oblique angle.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I think we're all clear on that now. Yes, Councillor Hooker, sorry.
Getting down to the minutiae of window issues, we've had these before with Velux. I see we've got Velux windows in the roof of the annex. Any issues there of those being opened and looking down into the conservatory? And we may get onto this in debate, whether there's a condition on those Velux. So you've obviously looked at that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I mean, due to the angles of the positioning of these roof lights, it's not considered that there would be a significant impact on the neighbouring conservatory due to the lay of the roof of the link building.
Thank you. And a follow-up, if I may. On the annex, I'm not confused, but I'd like just some explanation. It seems that the ground level, the floor level. Is that lower than the house? Do you step down in it? My only concern is that the ground seems to be taken away there, and considering the groundwater problems in East Garston and being a close proximity to the river, that could lend itself to a very nice swimming pool for someone.
Thank you, councillor. As you can see on the screen, it does show it will be level, but it will be the floor level should be level and then sunk down into the ground. We can suggest a levels condition which has been put on the update sheets in terms of groundwater and drainage. The drainage, the SUDS officer was consulted, and the applicant did submit several amendments in terms of drainage information, and it was deemed that whilst the SUD schemes submitted can't be perfect, they have done the best that they can in this area, and the drainage officer is happy with the scheme that has been submitted.
Thank you.
Okay, any other councillor Codling?
Can I ask of the officers that if we were minded to approve, could we link the link building to the main dwelling by condition that it couldn't be used to sublet or as a holiday home or whatever, or as a separate dwelling? Can we impose that condition?
Thank you, Chairman. The link building would form part of the approved dwelling, and some of the activities that you propose, that you're suggesting, including use as a separate dwelling, would actually be a change of use in planning terms. I would suggest that were members minded to approve, but subject to a condition controlling activities, then a restriction on permitted development rights for change of use of all or any part of the dwelling on the site could control that sort of activity where planning permission isn't specifically required for it already. So I'm talking about things like use of the site as a bed and breakfast. So my recommendation would be that, yes, it is possible to secure what the concerns would be in that case, I would suggest.
Thank you.
Okay, last goes, I think, councillor Hooker.
Thank you. Question, Simon, for you and Mr. Goddard, maybe. This is regard to the residents' concern of the building being moved back 2.5 metres or whatever, and the possibility of it being used by anyone, let alone the resident, as parking, which, if it is, negates the whole reason of moving the building back because the sight line is lost. Is there anything that can be done to safeguard that that piece of land being remained vacant, as quite a bit has been conceded to get this application in by moving the building?
I think I'll pass you over to Mr. Goddard first, and supplementary on anything he has to say if I need to.
Yeah. Chairman, I've heard this raised as a concern, and thank you for your question. I don't know who would park there. The applicants won't park there because they have two more parking spaces than what they had before. And from all the images that I've seen of Front Street, all the satellite images of Front Street, I have seen very little, if any, car parking along Front Street. So I'm not sure. I don't think it's a laughing matter.
No.
And I've seen the images here before me. And so I don't think there's a parking congestion issue along Front Street from the evidence that I have before me. Nevertheless, if members are concerned that parking may take place there, I would like to suggest a way forward, obviously with acceptance of the planning officers. And that is that we have a boundary treatment condition fronting the dwelling. I don't think any details of what they're going to do fronting this dwelling has been submitted unless the planning officer corrects me. But what I'm aiming to do here is that they submit details of their front boundary, which could be a wall or some sort of structure, obviously not to a height that would obstruct the sightline, but would provide a structure in the same line as what the building currently is. So therefore, the width of the road, the appearance of the width of the road is retained as is. And therefore, with that, I would not consider that there should be any greater risk of car parking taking place there than what there would be now. But obviously that needs to be acceptable to planning officers.
I can add to this. We do have a condition suggested for both soft landscaping and hard landscaping, which includes boundary treatments. So we could look at options such as soft landscaping in terms of we can request low level hedging because we also have the visibility splay condition, which states that visibility displays shall be kept free of all obstructions to visibilities over a height of 0.6 meters. So we have quite a few options in terms of we can either go for soft landscaping, boundary walls, cobbles. There's quite a few options in order to prevent cars from parking there and still retain the visibility displays.
Thank you. I think we're almost there. I do have just a couple myself. Plot only status has been mentioned. I can't recall that being used before in a planning meeting in terms of anything I should consider. Can you please?
I think the agent did make endeavours to explain that it's not something that we would usually come across very often in terms of planning, because it's a surveyor's term, essentially, and it's talking about the survey revealing that the value of the plot is only in the plot itself, not in the buildings on it, i.e. the survey associated with this, what we looked at in terms of the conservation officer providing advice on the demolition of the building, confirms that the building is not structurally sound for viable redevelopment, and only the plot retains residual value. If we were talking viability, we'd say the residual land value was only in the plot only.
I just want to make sure that it's not a term I'd missed. My final question is, none of you have mentioned on balance. So do I take it officers are rather convinced of their decision?
That is correct, Chairman. That is correct.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Hooker, yes, one last one.
A point of order, if I may, Chairman, and I'm sure Mr. Goddard won't mind me mentioning this, and it's no disrespect to him, and I'm sure he won't mind me what I'm going to say. It's been a long evening, and my residents have come a long way tonight to this meeting. It's a stressful time for them. This is a quite contentious issue that's been on the books for a long time, and this evening is the time that this committee is going to make a decision. And temperatures do rise a bit high, and I'm sure my residents didn't mind to sort of make a comment, but I think the riposte from Mr. Goddard was slightly over the top. And with your permission, Mr. Goddard, I'd like to apologise on behalf of this committee and the council for the way that he spoke to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hooker. As chairman of the meeting, I think the officer responded to laughter. So whereas I totally understand, and yes, it's to be avoided. I'm not sure I'm willing as chair to offer such an apology in what was a simple response to some laughter at comments that he was making. But I could be wrong on this, and it's no disrespect to anybody. It's just I don't think it's inappropriate to go that route. So moving on from that, we're going to enter debate now, everybody. Who would like to kick us off, please? Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I think we have been treating this seriously, and I was surprised that there was laughter. I don't know what caused it, but I think it's we are trying to run this meeting. You are trying to run the meeting, Chairman, with respect all round, and I think we've achieved that. But yes, we're also having a long evening, as well as the members sitting there waiting for us to determine. I think this is a really difficult one, and I do think it's balanced. I think the worst outcome is that this site remains and gets more and more derelict. And that was the purpose of my not very well phrased question to the parish council chairman. That I think the compromise is what you often have to do to ensure that an important site like this, which has a considerable land value, I can assure you, I'm a chartered surveyor by my profession, and a no plot sale is just what it says, or plot only sale. It's, discount the building. It's actually probably going to cost a lot more than the residual land value to knock it down. It actually reduces the market value. That's not a planning matter, though. But we do have to take into account that we are operating as a planning authority within a market system. And the result of putting conservation always first, as though we are protecting a community and a landscape in aspic, is that we will actually not be looking after it properly. We have to continue to develop in an appropriate way. And I think I'm not going to propose either way, but I think we have to look at this very carefully in all considerations. And I do think that the officers and the applicant have worked well together. And it is perhaps unfortunate if they haven't communicated with the local community, because they are the people, as has been said, as Councillor Hooker said, that have to live with the outcome. So they are a very, very important participant in the planning system. And that's why I've been given the community engagement portfolio as well as the planning portfolio, because it's such an important part of the planning system that we engage properly with communities. So that's what I'd say. I think we've got to think about this very carefully, and it could go either way.
Thank you. If you don't mind, everybody, I'm going to take chairman's privilege and make my own little, because I do feel quite strongly about this particular application. For me, I didn't hear that there wasn't any option to redo the existing facility. I heard right at the beginning that it was considered not viable, which usually means to say, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. Totally accept it would cost a lot of money to redo an asset of this nature. So it is a non-designated heritage asset, but there seems to be an oversight that it's not a designated heritage asset, not anything else. So having said all that, as we go through further into debate, please, members, be very careful about whatever you wish to propose, because if you propose going against officers' advice, I didn't hear the on balance, and therefore we're going to make it very difficult for them. Such should an appeal come in, for them to actually work for us, which is what they would do. They would absolutely try and do that. But we must think about, if you are going to make such a suggestion, please think carefully about how you might position that. So that's really where I'm coming from. You can probably see where my thinking is, and be honest with you, I'd rather it not be redeveloped like this, but I'm unclear as to what grounds I could pin it on to stop it. So anyway, on with the debate, please. And sorry, I saw Councillor Clark, Councillor Barnett, and Councillor Codling next.
Thank you, Councillor Abs. I think I was going to agree with Councillor Vickers that I think a lot of these issues could have been overcome through better engagement with neighbours and discussion with the community. But I'm not sure there's very much we can do about that now. So I just wanted to leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Well, as other members have said, it's already a long evening, and I can assure you I'm struggling sat here. I'm in agony, and I'm going to ask you, Chairman, at the end of this, debate if we have either suspend it for a few minutes or I shall have to stand up because I can't sit much longer.
Yeah,
So that's the
I
first
understand.
comment I was going to make.
Yeah, I understand your particular condition. By all means, stand up whenever you wish.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. In regarding the comment that Councillor Vickers has said, I feel myself in a very, very similar position. I don't like seeing derelict buildings and I don't like seeing unsafe buildings. And I felt that that building was unsafe, and especially for us on the site visit last week. And that rather concerned me. I know we're always asked to wear appropriate PPE, but PPE wouldn't have stopped us falling down holes and uneven ground. So please, can I ask in future, when we have the opportunity to visit these type sites, that we actually make sure that it's safe to attend. The application, I do feel it's a little bit larger than what I would expected it to have seen a replacement building. And also, I do have a little concern in relationship to the position. We've had a lot of comments about the street scene and the actual type of historic and nice looking buildings along that particular part of Font Street. And I feel that this will actually change it completely. So I do have a little concern about that as well. So at the moment, I'm afraid I'm still very much tippling against at the moment than probably for. But I'd like to hear more comments around the table before I make a final decision.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Codling.
Yeah, I think I'd like to echo about the lack of communication with residents and parish council. But on balance, I can't see where else this would go if we don't approve this and say the applicant comes back with another. I can't see it being very different. I do like the idea of a wall or something happening to prevent parking on the frontage there. And maybe if it was, of the same sort of brick, it would look better. It would look better on the street scene. But I can't see from these plans, and having looked at some of the other buildings that have been extended close by, they've changed as well over the years. So I think it's just moving with the times. So.
Okay. Who's next? Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said on my presentation, I came in to this application this evening not predetermined, and I've looked forward to the debate. And we've moved quite a way because we started off with the officer's recommendation. It's a firm one, which we appreciate. We've heard the chairman saying to us, well, strong recommendation. If we turn it down, this will go to appeal and be on your heads. We should not be under the influence of worry of going to appeal. If it's our conviction that we honestly think that this is not quite right, then we ought to go with it and see what happens at appeal. It won't be the first appeal that's gone ahead, and more than likely it might get overturned. But at least it's been our decision to make that on the evidence tonight. And as I say, I seriously was non-determined on this. I hadn't been lobbied. I've listened to the debate tonight, and I've listened to Councillor Vickers and very much to Councillor Barnett and the chairman. I've listened to the highways, and now we can get over that problem. And to be honest, I think the gap has closed, and there's not a great divide, let's say, on what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And if you look at this, not that we can say take this down or whatever, but it is a heritage asset, thereabouts, non-listed albeit. And I don't think it isn't a safe condition to be retained. But then we look at what it's going to be replaced with. And as I said, a part of my presentation, I think generally the resident, and certainly having looked at the drawings and the site, I'm quite happy with the 3-bedroom property. I think where the problem stands on this, it's I don't like to use the word because I've used it once before on a planning application, this carbuncle on the back. Now, if that wasn't on, I don't think all this contentious issue would have prevailed this evening. So with that in mind, and I don't think it's a perfect submission, It could be better, as been pointed out by others. I, like Councillor Barnett, at the moment waiting to listen to the rest of the debate, and I'm not prepared to do a proposal because I think that might not be fair being the ward member. But I'm prepared to listen to the debate, but I am leaning towards Councillor Barnett and one other or two, I think, that are a bit concerned about this application. Thank you, Chairman.
So, guys, you're the last one to speak. Councillor Wollaston, over to you.
Say the best to last, Chair.
Absolutely.
I share other people's views, and I'm in two minds over this application as well. My concern, I think, though, is that the existing building is without doubt in serious disrepair. My own view is that trying to repair it is probably an impossible task. It's got no foundations. And I think this is probably the least worst options where I'm coming from.
Okay. Well, if as we've not had a proposal at all, I will make one. I was hoping at least one of you would step up and make a proposal. So, given that I see a loss of amenity, I was not satisfied with the explanation of the oblique angles. It seems to be definitely worse to me. Whether we could repair the building or not, sorry, whether the building could be repaired or not, it does seem rather a disproportionate development from what I see of the village and size of the plot available. The rest of what was said from Mr. Goddard about distances and this and that, and the other, well, that's the plan that was put in front of him. If a different plan had been put in front of him, then we'd have a different kind of comment from the officer and so on. So with that in mind, I'm afraid I would like to, unfortunately, propose that we go against officer's advice and refuse this application on the grounds I've outlined. Thank you, Councillor Hooker. All those in favour?
Can we just, sorry, before we do that, can officers, can Mr. Till just clarify those reasons for refusal, just so we can be absolutely certain what we're refusing on?
Thank you very much.
Whether there's more than one.
Thank you, Chairman. I have down loss of amenity to neighbouring property, and I'm afraid my mind went blank at that point. So
disproportionate development.
Disproportionate development. So in that respect, we would be talking about impact on the character and appearance of the area and conservation area.
It's not that there aren't larger houses around, it's the plot size that we have, the type of building that's being proposed, which is effectively a four bedroom, 2-staged property with connections and so on. It just seems disproportionate within the plot that we're looking at, because it's quite a thin plot, even though it's quite long. So,
in the interest of having as many sensible reasons for objection, I'm not necessarily saying which way I'll vote, but I think we could also add harm to the street scene.
Thank you. That
which
was
has
all I
been
was going to say.
mentioned.
please feel free, gentlemen, and ladies, sorry. I did say that, we're going to have to be careful here to make sure we can help the officers.
Indeed,
So
I think I'm speaking as a portfolio holder here. I don't like us having our decisions lost on appeal, if that's possible.
I'm glad you added more words to I don't like us, but
Chairman, if you would just entertain a query on one of your proposed refusal reasons in the interests of
course,
a potential appeal situation. You've raised concerns with loss of amenity to a neighbouring property, and I'm just slightly concerned with the potential at appeal for it being proposed that the window concerned was obscure glazed. And
my argument would be it isn't one window. The new window is clearly, if you obscured that one, it doesn't matter. The middle window is still significantly closer and at a less oblique angle. So you're now saying, okay, let's have obscure glass on most of those windows, which seems an unreasonable condition to try and apply. So on your own reasoning earlier on about we can't have unreasonable conditions, blah, blah, blah. That's.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Would it be also a loss of a listed heritage asset?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, which of course it is, even though it's unlisted there. So, yes, Councillor Austin.
Could we add in that the vehicle access solution is not ideal? And that it would be better to have it on the other side, which means that you wouldn't have to move the building nearer to, or the proposed building nearer to the other property?
I'm not, one we could ask, I'm not sure, but.
Chairman, it's very important. I understand that there are potential alternatives. There are potential alternatives with any planning application, but we are asked to consider the application in front of us, and we do have the highways officers quite strong advice in terms of the vehicular access solution that's proposed.
So I don't think so in this case. So that's it.
I don't know how we log the fact that we're not. I don't think although we're losing an asset, we're not opposed to the building being replaced with something else.
Indeed,
But of a proportionate size and sympathetic to the area.
We're into theory, we're not looking at a 3-bedroom house on the same footprint of the existing one with amenities. We're asked to look at a 4-bedroomed house with extensions and so on. So that's what we're looking at. Okay, we've had a proposer, we had a seconder. I need to conduct the vote.
Is it worth Mr. Till just reading them back, or is everyone clear what they're voting on?
Why not? We'll take the 2 seconds it takes.
I have loss of amenity to the neighbouring property, and thank you, Chairman, for your explanation there. Disproportionate and an increase in impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. Harm to the street scene, which I would say forms part of that impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. Yes, the conservation area.
So just for the record, the word historic was asking to be added.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the loss of a designated heritage asset resulting in harm. Non-designated heritage asset.
Okay.
Apologies. Thank you, Chairman.
No problem. Designated will be a different conversation. So, right. Just the vote, please. All those in favour of rejecting the officer's recommendations, please raise their hand. All those against? All those abstaining? Did we have just passed, right?
Yeah, so it's refused.
They unfortunately, fortunately for some, but unfortunately for others, that application is refused. So I'm going to take a 5-minute rest break now, because I say we're starting to roll on. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. We all ready? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the last application of this evening, land south of Tower Works, Lambourne Woodlands. So who have we got here? Miss Cutts, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I should just start to share my screen.
Yeah.
There we go. Right. Thank you, Chairman. This application is seeking approval of matters reserved by Condition 9 of the Outline Planning Permission for the erection of a new logistics warehouse building, ancillary office and aircraft museum with associated works for Walker's Logistics on land south of Tower Works, Lambourne Woodlands. The condition required the building to be zero carbon. The condition says no development shall take place until a plan demonstrating how the building hereby approved will meet with the requirement for zero carbon development, including construction, monitoring and reporting measures, has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Thereafter, the development shall be carried out in accordance with the approved plan. And the reason for this was in order to secure zero carbon development in accordance with policy CS15 of the core strategy. Members will recall that this condition was the subject of an application to discharge a number of conditions which was brought before this committee in August. And this condition was refused by the committee as it was considered that insufficient information had been included with the energy statement to demonstrate how the zero carbon requirement would be met during construction. This condition refers to the construction, monitoring and reporting measures which relate to the building itself and not to the use of the site or any traffic movements associated with it. There have been no objections raised to the details submitted with this application. The energy statement, which was included with the previous application, has been resubmitted and supplemented by a technical note. The energy statement sets out how the total carbon emissions in regulated and unregulated carbon emissions will be reduced through the use of air source heat pumps and solar photovoltaics to meet the zero carbon requirements. These tables show the reduction in regulated energy in table 1, the top table, and unregulated energy before and after the air source heat pumps and photovoltaic panels are added in. This results in a carbon reduction of 105% and exceeds the CS15 requirement of 100%. The technical note, which has been submitted, sets out how the operational energy, built fabric and construction impacts have been considered within the proposals. So the figures that they have provided are the design predictions from the Bruckle document, which is required for building regulations. The technical note confirms that the as-built Bruckle calculation will be provided once the building is completed to demonstrate that the design matches with what has been built. And so we'll take into account any alterations in the design, in the build-out process. The technical note confirms that as-built Bruckle calculation will be provided once the building is completed. Oh, sorry, I go back on myself. Sorry. In addition, the BREEAM assessment, which is required to meet condition 8, also requires energy calculations to be submitted and analysed. And this information will be provided us to the local planning authority as part of that assessment, as this will also need to be provided in order to meet the BREEAM excellent standard.
Just one moment. We seem to be on East Graston
sorry.
again. Thank you.
I've gone too far.
We got on the right.
Sorry, there you go.
Thank you.
There we go. Apologies. Right. I was talking about BREEAM in condition 8. So there's an overlap between what's required to meet the BREEAM condition and what's required in this zero carbon condition. So the technical note has also addressed the embodied carbon of construction materials within the development. And because of the overlap between the two conditions, the evidence that's required to meet BREEAM can also be used to demonstrate the meeting of this condition. The appendices to the technical note shows that under target map 01, environmental impacts from construction products, building life cycle assessments, 4 out of the 6 credits are being targeted and 3 have already been awarded. And this in itself is a leading industry methodology for assessing embodied carbon of materials. In addition, to support the construction monitoring and reporting measures of this condition, the BREEAM issue MAN 03, monitoring of construction site impacts, will be used. This sets out requirements for the contractor to target, monitor and record data for energy consumption, transportation of materials and waste to and from the site, and to operate a recognised environmental management system, and also to appoint a BREEAM accredited professional to monitor the construction process. So this information will also be provided, and this information will also provide the monitoring that is required to meet condition 9. It's important for members to note that the council's environment delivery team have been consulted on the energy statement and the technical note and are satisfied with the evidence that has been submitted together with the overlapping BREEAM requirements, and are satisfied that the requirements of condition 9 have been met. The energy statement, supplemented by the technical note, provides sufficient information to demonstrate that the requirements of condition 9 to provide zero carbon development have been met through the provision of air source heat pumps and photovoltaics, and with the submission of as-built BRUCL for regulated energy, and the provision of unregulated energy calculations using the CIBSE TM54 methodology. Together with the construction and monitoring information as part of the BREEAM Excellent, this demonstrates how the carbon requirements will be met in the construction process. It's considered that these two documents meet the requirements of condition 9 to provide a zero carbon building and accord with policy CS15. This application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I don't know highways considerations, so I think we shall be moving on to speakers. Yes. So I have James Hicks, the agent here from the Pegasus Group in person. Is that right? I do notice that we have parish councillors here, but they are not on the list. And as there were no objections from the parish council in the record, I'm not inclined to invite them to speak. So I'm going to move straight on to the agent. Thank you. It's all right, we're just waiting for the people to go. Ready?
Chairman, with regards to those parish councillors, have we determined whether they did or did not apply, and if they applied, it was lost in the workings, or they just didn't apply to?
I did ask, and there's been no indication of any request to speak. That
they're regular attenders. They should know the process.
They certainly know the process, and to explain, I don't really need to explain the reason, but the reason I chose not to invite them is that there was nothing submitted by the parish council in terms of objections. So if they had, and they were coming to explain it.
There was no site meeting, so was any invitation sent?
Anyway,
Could I just give some clarification, Chairman? As I understand, the clerk of the parish council forgot to put the application, the notice.
I understand that clerks sometimes get things wrong, but unfortunately, you know, that's the decision I've made this evening. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. And we're ready when you are. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And good evening. As you've already heard, my name is James Hicks. I'm a chartered town planner and I'm instructed by Walker Logistics to represent them. I am the agent for the current application, but a moment of some honesty, I'm not an energy or a building assessor. I'm merely a town planner. As you know, outline planning permission and the subsequent reserve matter approvals are in place for the development at Lambourne Woodlands. And this condition discharge application forms the last approval required now to allow that development to lawfully commence. Members of this committee, as you've already heard, will recall that the discharge application in respect of condition 9 was presented to this committee back in August. Rather unfortunately, the committee resolved to refuse to discharge the condition. However, following this refusal, the applicant team has worked closely with your officers to both fully understand the committee's concerns insofar as the deficiency of the information we provided, but also to develop and to provide a suitable and technically robust response. This scheme now presented to discharge condition 9 is extensive and robust, as you've already heard. I've personally overseen the work between the applicant's consultants and the council's officers to produce this net zero strategy. And I'd like to thank them for their time in explaining the committee's concerns and also carefully considering our approach to a resolution. In summary, the proposals presented in respect of condition 9, whilst are highly technical, they address all the requirements of the conditions as they are required to do so in planning law. I am therefore grateful that your officers are content now to report to you so positively this evening, and I hope that you can agree that that condition can now be discharged and that development can commence. Thank you.
Thank you. Just remain there, Councillor Wollaston.
Are you aware there's also a travel plan condition as well?
Sorry, that wasn't discussed. It wasn't mentioned.
No, but you said this was the last condition that needed. It was required. It's not the last condition.
Well, that's clarification of officers.
Okay, fine.
Thank you very much. Councillor Calder.
I understand that aircraft are going to be on site because there's going to be a museum. Have you included the carbon emissions from that in your energy plan?
The carbon emissions in accordance with the condition need to deal with the energy used in the building and the building's built fabric. It's nothing to do with the way that the building operates or relevant to the aircraft, and that's been agreed between the officers and our team.
Okay, thank you.
Is it not the case that it includes unregulated as well as regulated carbon, and the unregulated is related to the use of the building?
Sounds like clarification from the officers again. Councillor Calder.
If it helps, as I've already said, I'm not a building assessor or an energy assessor. I'm aware, but at least I understand that your a specialist officer is available to take that clarification to assist you.
Is that correct? Will we have the officer? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on then. Any other questions of clarification? You've mentioned that you're I have just a couple of little ones. You mentioned that you've put robust systems in place or something of that nature. Could you mind sharing exactly what systems have been put in place?
I don't think I referred to systems. I'm saying that the report and the response we've provided in respect of the refusal is a robust response to it. And as the officer has already explained, we've tried to link all aspects of the planning permission, all the conditions, which is why we talk of the addendum report and the BREEAM requirement as well.
Okay, thank you very much. My mistake. So any other members like to ask a no? Okay, then on to the ward member. Thank you very much. On to the ward member, Councillor Howard of Wollaston. You have the 5 minutes. Oops. Yes, just bear with 1 second while we have a quick water break. It's all those technical questions he's going to ask you shortly, Councillor Wollaston. That's okay. I think yeah, we're good to go. Ready? Off you go.
Members will be aware that I've opposed this application right from the start. And I suspect if it had been put before this current committee, it would be refused, as in my view, it remains the wrong building in the wrong location. But we are where we are. This is a technical request to release a condition referring to carbon zero in the development. In the circumstances, given experienced officers confirming that the applicant's submission meets environmental requirements, I can see no reason not to accept the officer's recommendation, albeit reluctantly.
That certainly wasn't 5 minutes. No.
I know, I promise you.
Right, members, is there any clarification you could seek on what was just said? Anybody? Nope, off we go then. So next we have clarification of the officers. Is there any question? Thank you very much, Carol Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, just returning to my earlier question. So I understand that we're looking in this condition at regulated and unregulated carbon, and unregulated carbon relates to the use of a building once it's been constructed. So I would repeat my earlier question. Has the emissions from the aircraft that are going to be there been included in those unregulated use calculations?
We do have Emily Ashton-Jelly in the meeting, who's the Principal Environment Delivery Officer, and she's available to
Let's
answer
bring her on the screen then,
questions.
please.
So, I think she's unable to be on screen, but she is.
Do we have audio at least?
We have audio.
Is that acceptable?
Sorry, why can't she be on the screen? Sorry.
She's unwell at the moment.
Oh, so she's just audio. Okay. Okay, understood. Yes.
And that's acceptable.
Well, she's available to answer your questions unless
Okay,
anyone's got any.
No, but that's fine.
Don't believe it's her. Or, yeah, I know this is-
let's have the question answered then. I don't know where.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, no problem.
In relation to unregulated energy in a building, it actually doesn't include any transportation elements of a building. So unregulated energy, in accordance with the BRE's definition, actually includes things like IT equipment, lifts, escalators, refrigerated systems, external lighting, fume cupboards, servers, printers, photocopiers, laptops, cooking equipment, visual and audio equipment, and doesn't include anything like transport, such as a plane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Culver, anything more or?
I'll mention it in debate.
Okay, so I would like to just you to expand on it. You're absolutely right. When our plane is moving, that would be considered transport then. But my understanding, this thing's supposed to be static and plugged in. It won't just be sitting there. It'll be plugged into something and still be using energy. Am I correct or incorrect? You don't just leave a plane out and, you know, we all think of, especially old planes like that. You keep the batteries charged up with anything else. Correct or incorrect? Would it not be the equivalent of a fridge?
Is this a question to officers?
Well, yeah, I don't know where to look. So it's
Well,
a question to the
I think if we can just refer back to the condition, and the condition asks for a plan demonstrating how the building hereby approved will meet the requirement for zero carbon development.
Okay.
So
the
the
fact
plane
that it's
is
got the word building
irrelevant.
in there means the transport thing, the plane,
is not part of the condition.
and probably fridges as well. So, Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I'm struggling because, you know, this is a highly specialist subject, but the development managers brought it to us for our attention because of our interest in this. But maybe it's a question to officers, probably to the specialist officer, is how is this going to be monitored by us as a local planning authority? Is that something that we are in-house, we have officers in-house qualified to monitor and that will have the time to monitor? I'm thinking when you multiply this up by all the developments that are going to be coming through, which require zero carbon, how are we doing the monitoring?
Chairman, if I can take that question, I think that monitoring is a discussion for outside of this meeting, because it is a discussion regarding how the council goes about resourcing necessary enforcement of planning conditions, and your officers bring this to you with the condition already approved as deemed reasonable at the time that we recommended it. I can assure you that an inspector would be likely to take the view that the condition was enforceable and reasonable, therefore. I think it goes somewhat beyond the remit of what I'm prepared to answer at the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers, any? No? I actually had a similar-ish question, but not quite the same, Mr. Till, in that we understand, those of us who've looked at BREEAM Excellent and have been on planning for a while, that if you don't keep the records accurately and carefully, you can all of a sudden not fulfill your BREEAM. And I'm thinking of Highway Cop School as an example where the paperwork was lost and it therefore couldn't be the excellent it was meant to be. So I am concerned in the discharge of this condition that not so much the monitoring of it, but that the solution is in place to store all the data that we can actually believe in. Now, does what's submitted actually contain enough detail for us to have that assurance to say, yes, on paper, it looks like it will meet the condition, but we're also sure that the details will be kept long enough and safe enough for us to be able to achieve the BREEAM Excellent that it's supposed to achieve.
Members, I should note that in the case of Highwood Copse, there was a perfectly enforceable condition that yes, the circumstances surrounding that were unfortunate. Data was lost in transfer of the site, as I understand it. We can't prepare for every eventuality. If somebody deletes or doesn't pass over or loses a database that they should retain, but the condition requires that information is provided. We're satisfied that the reporting within that information is sufficient for us to check on it, that it has been undertaken within the condition and in terms of the information provided. So I don't think we can ask for more than that. I can't sit on somebody's desk and ensure the safety of their hard disk, I'm afraid.
It was more about whether the systems were there in the first place. But okay, Councillor Woodiston, then I think we need to think about, because it's 10 to, think about whether we're going to conclude this in the next 10 minutes or whether we should just. So anyway.
This is a very quick yes or no response. I just want to double check the travel plan condition is still outstanding.
Yes, the travel plan isn't part of this application and it's a pre-occupation condition. So it requires that the travel plan isn't approved. The building isn't brought into use until the travel plan has been approved.
So it could be built but not occupied.
Yeah.
Right. Any more clarification? No. Then anybody would like to start the debate off? No, I don't think if I'm reading the room correctly, I think we're good. Anybody would actually like to kick the debate off? Councillor Vickers.
I don't think there's much we can debate. I don't think we are qualified, in a sense, to question what officers are recommending. And this is why, and something I can take outside the meeting, and probably you might agree, whether this has been a good use of everyone's time, this particular item.
Well, we have a wrap-up.
So I'm happy to propose that we accept officer's recommendation if that moves things on.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that. Is that on my pay grade, this one?
Okay, so in that case, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, it's unanimous. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Okay, I didn't. I thought I saw your head and go up. One abstention, the rest. Okay, well, thank you. That round draws a close to this evening's proceedings. Thank you very much all for coming along. See some of you at tomorrow night's exec, I guess. Emergency exec. So thanks. Bye-bye.
Chairman, before we close, considering the